Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, October 2nd at 6:30. All selectmen, sans Mr. Kalenda, are present. First appointment is 6:30, tax classification hearing. Mr. Purple, will you do the honors?
Sure. The Southborough Board of Selectmen shall hold a public hearing with the Board of Assessors on Tuesday, October 2nd, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. to determine the certified valuation of each class of property, the minimum residential factor, and the allocation of the tax burden among the four classes of real property: residential, open space, commercial and industrial, and personal property. The hearing will be held in the McAuliffe Hearing Room, Southborough Townhouse, 17 Common Street, Southborough, Mass. Interested citizens may present oral or written views prior to or during the public hearing. Board of Selectmen and Board of Assessors, September 18th, 2018.
Thank you. Mr. Sabella, you have a presentation for us, please.
I do. Madam Chair, good evening, honorable board members. With me is, I guess our chairman is in transit, Jeff Klein. Tom Beaumont's with us. I also have Cindy McLeod, our deputy assessor, and Tammy Rice here, who'll be running the presentation. We'll run through this quickly, and of course, it's going to culminate with a vote and some paperwork to sign. So why don't we get started? So what is tax classification? It allows communities to have different tax rates for certain classes of property. Class 1 is residential, Class 2 is open space, Class 3 is commercial, Class 4 is industrial, and Class 5 is personal property. So a commercial, industrial, and personal property combined is known as CIP. State statute provides a minimum allowable portion of the tax levy, up to 150%, to be borne by the CIP classes. It also provides a minimum allowable portion to be borne by the residential class. Some key concepts for tax classification: it allows the Board of Selectmen to make the decision whether or not to shift the burden from one class of property to another. No additional tax dollars are raised, as the tax levy remains the same. The town of Southborough has never had a split rate, and it's an issue of fairness between classes. A couple of comments about the fiscal year assessments. FY19 assessments are based on analysis of calendar year 2017 sales and market conditions. The 19 assessments reflect the value of the properties as of January 1, 2018, and that's per Department of Revenue guidelines. Just want to remind everybody the calendar year 2018 sales and market conditions will be reflected in the FY 2020 assessments, as there is a one-year time lag in the assessment process. So what is happening with the assessments? The assessments are on the rise. The residential class, and we're talking overall, the class, increased 3.3%. Commercial class increased 1%, and the industrial class approximately 6.3%. The town's total valuation increased by $76.29 million to a new high of $2.518 billion in FY19. It's a lot of value for a small town. Fiscal year 2019 new growth. The assessors calculated $38.641 million in new growth value within the town, and this represents $623,675 in new growth tax dollars. And although this is the result as a 4.78% decrease in new growth from the prior year, you can see there that we did exceed our 10-year new growth average of $613,545. Average single-family home assessed value increased $17,000 to $613,800, which is a 2.8% increase. And this is the 9th consecutive year it has risen. If we continue with a single tax rate, the FY19 tax rate would increase 3.72% from $16.14 to $16.74. The average single-family tax bill would rise from $9,632 in FY18 to $10,275 in FY19. This is a $643 or 6.68% increase. And of course, this excludes the community preservation surcharge, which you can see there on the bottom of the slide, which is an additional $86. Just real quick, we have an 8-year history kind of showing you the average single-family tax bill. And obviously, you can see, you never want to see a big increase like that, or a steep increase, but it is what it is. With the average single-family home tax bill rising nearly 6.7%, I thought I'd assemble a slide that gave us an idea what the commercial, industrial, mixed-use assessments and tax bill are. Something I don't think I've had the last couple of years. I know John Rooney used to love this information, so we put it in there. We arrived at the average commercial, industrial, mixed-use assessment by taking all the class properties and just removing vacant land and office condos. So basically, it leaves us with land improved with a building on it. And this is just for analysis purposes. The average assessed commercial, industrial, mixed-use improved property rose from $2,595,600 to $2,799,400, a 7.9% increase. And I was a little surprised by this. The average commercial, industrial, mixed-use tax bill, if we continue with a single rate, would rise from $41,983 to $46,862, which is about 11.6% increase. Our relationship of the class values, so the commercial, industrial, and personal property classes combined represents 19.30% of the town's total value, which overall isn't a huge percentage. This is down slightly from the previous year, which was 19.40. History shows that CIP typically runs between 17 and 20%. Probably the last 5 or 6 years, it's pretty much, CIP has pretty much been around 19%. So, the Board of Assessors unanimously recommends continuing with a single tax rate for fiscal year 2019. And I'll just review some of the reasons, and they haven't really changed over the years. With the relatively small percentage of value that comes from the CIP, again, 19.30, a split rate would only produce a small savings to the residential class and would increase the CIP classes, making Southborough a less attractive place to conduct business. The board believes a single tax rate helps a small town like Southborough attract new businesses into the community while retaining those already located in town. Expanding businesses within the community provides new tax dollars with little impact on costly town services. Although CIP properties account for 5.81% of Southborough's taxable parcels, they generate 19.30% of the town's tax revenue. This figure includes personal property taxes, which many businesses pay in addition to their real estate taxes. Southborough CIP is comprised of mostly small businesses, not big box stores or large corporations. I think that's a key in deciding something like this, is what is your commercial and industrial personal property makeup. And again, it's always been pretty much smaller entities. The Board of Assessors also recognizes the role businesses play in contributing additional funds to support many of the town's athletic, recreation, and community events. This is something, for my whole lifetime, they've done a great job is really helping out with things such as that. Just some additional facts. 69% of Massachusetts communities had a single tax rate in fiscal year 18, same as the previous year. So 69% obviously is an overwhelming number. April 15, town meeting voted overwhelmingly to defeat a non-binding article to have a split tax rate. And in 2015, town meeting voted to fund a part-time economic development coordinator to help expand future business development within the community. Thus, a split tax rate would be prohibitive to the EDC's goals. What we have here is just wanted to go over just a kind of a tax rate shift impact. And again, we're only going to present a 5% shift. So the top half here is going to show you the, if we continued with a single tax rate, and the bottom one, which we'll get to in a second, is a 5% tax rate shift scenario. So if you look at a 5% shift tax scenario, residential rate would decrease to $16.54, while CIP would increase to $17.54. This produces only a 1.2% or $123 savings, while increasing CIP property by 5%, or $2,351. Just in round numbers to really think about it, based on our CIP split, for every $1 you save the residential, it costs the commercial, industrial, personal property $4. Kind of the easiest way to look at it. Again, a lot of people like to see what the tax rates are. I want to remind everybody, these are 18 rates. Most towns have not, or just about none of these towns have set rates yet. We're probably one of the earliest towns. Just to kind of give an idea how we stack up against everybody else, kind of in the middle of the pack. There are two other shift options that are available that we have not included in our presentation previously. So you're seeing these for the first time, so I'm going to take a couple minutes and go over these. Nice to see our chairman could make it. Thanks for sliding in, Jeff. They are the residential exemption and the small commercial exemption. Although Southborough is not a likely candidate to adopt either of these, as you'll see, these two exemptions, they should still be discussed and a formal vote should be taken to complete the classification hearing. Unlike the split rate option that shifts burden between classes, these are shifts within the class. As with the split rate, no additional taxes are raised by either of these exemptions. It's just shifting burden, again, within the class. So let's start with the residential exemption. Shifts tax burden within the residential class from lower assessed properties to seasonal, rental, and higher assessed properties. Allowed only on residential property that is a primary residence of the taxpayer. If adopted, the residential exemption can be up to 20% of the average assessed value of all residential parcels. Accepting this option increases the residential tax rate only. Typically, this exemption is adopted in areas with a low rate of owner occupancy. So when you're thinking of seasonal, Cape Cod, Barnstable, and Nantucket would be some examples there. If you're thinking, places with a lot of rental property, obviously you're looking at Boston and Cambridge. To make sense of all this, let's take a look at a scenario where 95% of the residents qualify for the exemption. So obviously, a town like Southborough, mostly owner-occupied, people are primary residents. And again, this is just an assumption you make to come up with a scenario to take a look at it. So on the left, you see without exemption, you're going to have the assessed value. We have 350, 613, 800 is just the average assessed, and we threw in a number at 850. If we kept a single rate of 1674, you'd see the tax bill there. Now let's assume that we adopted a 10% exemption. 10% exemption would work out approximately to $57,565. So let's just focus in for a second on the $350,000 assessed home. We take the exemption, subtract it off the $350,000 home. Again, this has to be the person's primary residence. It would leave you a net taxable value, if you will, of $292,435. So that's essentially the assessment that they would pay taxes on. The $18.41 tax rate is a calculation that comes just out of the scenario that we ran. And it produces a tax bill of $5,384. So you can see it's about a $475 savings. So now here's what we talk about shifting burden. Take a look at the $850,000 home. Okay, you can see what it does there, and it would increase their taxes approximately $360. The tipping point, if you will, is $634,600. So any owner-occupied home assessed over that would pay more, while those below would pay less. Just real quick on the tax rate of $18.41. It would be lower if we had run that scenario at, say, 50% owner-occupied, 50% of the people. So obviously the lower number of people who qualify would certainly adjust that tax rate. Again, a shift within the class. Does nothing to the commercial or industrial. It's a shift within the class. As you can see at the very bottom, 15 of 351 communities adopted the residential exemption. Not exactly very popular. It's probably why we didn't present it before. Even less popular is the old small commercial exemption. Grants a small commercial exemption to all Class 3 commercial properties that are occupied by businesses with an average annual employment of no more than 10 people and an assessed valuation of less than $1 million. Adopting this exemption increases the commercial and industrial tax rates. Again, we're talking shift in the class. This exemption creates a tax burden shift that reduces taxes paid by owners of properties occupied by small businesses and shifts them to larger commercial and industrial taxpayers. The amount of the tax levy paid by these two classes still remains the same. Again, burden. We're shifting burden. The exemption is for the property owner, not the small business. So if you have a small business renting, it doesn't go to them, it goes to the owner. Again, as you can see, 14 of 351 communities adopted this. I believe the examples I found were Braintree and Bellingham. You have to have quite a diverse and large commercial, industrial inventory, I think, to even consider something like this, but obviously not too many are. Again, we haven't previously shown these, but it is still important that we do take a vote on those. The recommendation on those two, the Board of Assessors unanimously recommends not to adopt the residential and commercial, small commercial exemptions, as they are not really relevant to this community for the reasons that we've outlined. Madam Chair, the further action items, as you can see, we need some selectmen discussion. Probably want to open it up for some public comment. The selectmen need to take a vote. Unlike previous years where you just split on the tax rate, you need to make a motion on all three of the up there, the split tax rate, the residential exemption, and the small commercial exemption. And obviously, I've dropped some paperwork off to you. If we can come to some sort of decision tonight, it would be nice. Back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work on putting this together, you, your department, and your board. I just have a couple quick questions for you. On the third, I'm assuming it's the third slide. Maybe it's the 2, 4, 6 slide. The fiscal year 2019 new growth.
You want to go back to that, Sam? So put it back up there for us.
Sorry, I'll just let you bring it up before I ask my question.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. There's a decrease in the new growth from fiscal year 2018.
Yep.
Do you know, and again, you may not know this off the top of your head, what was the main growth in 2018, just for comparison?
Yeah, this actually had a footnote. I probably should have read it. I think we had personal property was more. We had a pretty good, a sizable increase last year.
Okay.
One of the things, I'm just going to read this real quick. 274,500, or 44% of our total new growth, is attributed to personal property, which, unlike real property, depreciates over time. The good thing that we have, even though the overall number is down, Madam Chair, is that last year's personal property represented 57%. So it's good that we have a little bit of a shift, and we have more of it coming from our real estate. Obviously, that retains value, doesn't depreciate. So it helps us in the long run with our tax rate. Hopefully, I answered your question.
You did, thank you. On the single rate impact residential slide.
Down there?
It's,
Scenario?
the scenario with the, would increase 3.72. Yeah, actually, it's fine. It's different on mine, that's why.
Oh.
So if you go back, that's fine. So, it talks about the average tax bill, what would rise, or a $643 increase. And is there a breakout for the town meeting increase versus public safety? I believe, Mr. Purple, you may be able to answer that?
Yes.
Okay.
So inside of the numbers that Mr. Sabelli is speaking of, and the numbers that he ended up with in his presentation, there is a total public safety debt of $696,511. So it's a total of about $15.46 million in money that's been borrowed, $7.76 million permanently issued, which accounts for about $578, almost $579,000. And then in September, the board just approved a temporary loan for $7.7 million. And that is, we're only paying the interest at this point, about $117,000, almost $118,000 in interest. So of the projected increase About 1.76% of that is attributable to the public safety project. On the average tax bill, the numbers Mr. Sabelli had up of $643, about $170 of that $643 is attributable to the public safety project.
So about 26% of the increase is attributed to that.
Okay, thank you. Quickly, and then I will open it up to the board. Estimated savings, okay, you already answered that question for me. On the residential exemption and the small commercial exemption, if we take a vote tonight, I guess that hasn't been voted on in the past, I'm assuming, is that an every year vote, that when you come and give your presentation?
Yeah, we really should be doing it. You know, I've talked to other assessors, you know, some of them don't present it, but in talking to the Department of Revenue, you know, to complete the classification, we really should be. I know Northborough, for instance, they vote on it every year. And it's really just dotting the i's and crossing the t's at this point.
Okay, questions from the board? Mrs. Faniff?
Again, thank you for your presentation. What percentage do we have in vacancy rates in commercial buildings?
So most of ours is office, so I'm going to kind of dwell on that. If you notice, the commercial only went up 1%, and that's exactly why it was the rates on office vacancy did pop up. You know, you're looking at probably 12 to 15% range. We had a bit of an uptick on that. In talking to some of the owners, it's kind of why is something bad happening. It's more just a lot of leases up in this area. The good news is it does seem to be backfilling fairly nicely. We're seeing a lot of permits being pulled to renovate the space for new tenants coming in. So that's good, because that's really a good point that you bring up is we really want to watch the vacancy rates on our office, because that's the bulk of our value comes from. That's where a lot of our large businesses are. They're lower on the industrial buildings. We don't have a lot of industrial buildings, but that market seems to be fairly strong, which is good news.
So a vacant building, commercial building, also affects the personal property tax within that building. That's not passed, it's passed on to the owner, but we lose both potentially.
If they had personal property, yeah, it's an
Yes.
opportunity for personal property without a doubt. Doesn't necessarily mean they had a personal property, depends on how they file. But yeah, I mean, you can definitely draw that. Obviously, the higher the vacancy rates, it's going to affect your opportunity to capture personal
So if a
property.
building is up for sale, a commercial building, industrial building, does the evaluation change in the town hall? If I own something today for $5 million and I sell it tomorrow for $10 million, what's the valuation of the town hall? How do we adjust
Well,
the
back up.
selling?
You're talking if a building is vacant,
No, if I own a building and it's occupied,
okay,
and I bought it for $5 million.
Yep.
Then I sell the building, and now it's $10 million. When does that difference show up on the books within the town hall?
I'm
On the
assuming you're not,
assessors map?
I'm assuming you're not buying it and selling in the same week.
I
It'd
don't
be
know, it
over
could be
time.
good.
What we're doing is we're looking at these properties and basing the income, basing the commercial and industrial values on the income approach. So what we're watching is things that you mentioned, rents, vacancy rates, things of that nature. And that's what we're utilizing in building the valuation model. So in a situation like that, you're hopefully, when it sells at 10 million, based on the evaluation model that you built, that you're pretty close to 10 million. That would be my answer to you, okay? It's not, you know, we adjust every year. It's not, geez, only on the sales. Department of Revenue would get a little wiggy about only adjusting sales and nobody else.
No, but if it's outside the year, because that's what we're voting on, so this evening, if it's next year when you're before us and you see a building in town that sold substantially more than what was on the books, that is indicated in the presentation that you make to the Board of Selectmen, that you're already aware of it.
Okay, so say we saw a building, yeah.
Okay,
First of all, we'd research it. Why?
okay.
You need to know, did it include personal property? Did it include business value? Which a lot of the commercials, actually a good point you bring up, a lot of commercial sales that you see, people look at it and really, You have to pick the sale apart, much unlike a residential property, because you really want to know, is there business value included in there? Personal property could be included in there. So those are some of the things that we're researching and looking at. Was the building renovated and we didn't know about it? So you'd research the sale and figure out why. That would be my answer. Does it happen occasionally? Happens in anything, residential, commercial. Every once in a while, you get a building that sells, significantly higher.
I asked the question, Paul, only because we see the transactions in the newspapers,
Yep.
the residents, and sometimes they question, there's a big jump here. When do we address that jump in the assessor's office? And you just gave them a lesson on
It is, and
how we
again,
do it.
it's a great point because people see the sale price. Commercial, industrial, again, you got to be very, very careful because it includes other things. And it's typical. And a lot of times we end up throwing the sale out and not using it, considering it an arm's length transaction, just for that fact. Remember, the assessment only includes the real estate or real property.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Shea?
Yep. On the residential exemption, you had listed a couple of the communities that you think have incorporated the commercial exemption. Do you have a listing of the representative communities of the 15 that you know that have incorporated the residential?
Brian, I don't have it with it. I do have a spreadsheet on it. If you want me to, I could email you that, and it shows the breakdown of the communities.
I think you had mentioned it's probably typical more rental towns.
Yeah,
I'm just curious if
it's
that-
typically large cities that have a tremendous amount of rental property.
Okay.
A lot of apartments, things of that nature. I literally ran the list but didn't take the list with me. I could have read them all off to you.
Okay.
But on that, it was mostly, it was Boston and Cambridge or the Cape communities. We're talking the residential, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Most of them were down the Cape, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, the seasonal homes.
Yep.
Yeah, so hammer the guy that doesn't live there, right, and doesn't get to vote at town meeting. That's essentially what it is. But that's where most of them were, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
Anything, Mr. Schifrin?
For me, it comes down to two things mentioned in the presentation. One is the makeup of our town being primarily residential and small business, and two, the benefit to attracting new business to town versus a split rate. So I concur with our assessor. That's all.
Thank you. I just wanted to add as well that Carl Geyer had sent a note to the board letting us know that he was unavailable to come tonight. I know he has a different position on the split tax rate, and he did ask that if we again vote to maintain the single tax rate this year, that he would appreciate an opportunity to review the demographics from the DOR with us in the future. So I just want to make the public aware that he could not be here tonight, and that the board would certainly entertain that going further in the future. So my thoughts are the same as Mr. Schifrin's. I concur. I look at some of the towns at this point that have the split tax rate, and they are all towns that have a much larger majority. Well, maybe majority is not the right word, but they have a much higher commercial base than we have. Framingham, for instance, to carry more of the burden. Let's see, who else was there? Sudbury, Marlborough, which again, and Hudson, which is very different than Southborough is. So I also support the single tax rate at this point, but I would certainly like to hear from Mr. Geyer before we have this discussion again next year. Any other discussion from public? Yep.
Public comment?
Public comment.
Thanks. Sam Stivers, Presidential Drive. I've made some comments at previous classification hearings that along the lines that I think we should consider a split tax rate. I'm disappointed that Carl Geyer is not here tonight. I think his data is pretty compelling in a lot of ways, but he needs to speak to that point. I think there are a number of towns out there that look a lot like Southborough in terms of the split between residential and commercial who have a split tax rate. I think there is no data. I've been asking for years to see data that relates the split tax rate to businesses leaving town. And I've not seen any data that suggests that that somehow drives businesses out of town. There are a lot of towns that have a substantially split tax rate that seem to attract a lot of business in town. In fact, one of the key losses that we've had in terms of businesses leaving Southborough is the Kaz company, and they went to Marlborough, which has a hugely split tax rate shift there. So that obviously wasn't a deciding factor for them in terms of that tax rate. But I think there's one interesting reason this year to think about giving a break to the residential taxpayers. We've got, what, 3,500 or so residential property taxpayers, a few hundred businesses. I don't know if the assessors or the selectmen have looked at the impact of the federal tax law changes for 2018. The new 18 tax laws for federal taxpayers, which is mostly all of us, did two things. One, they limited the state and local tax deduction called SALT. And in fact, whereas that was not limited or capped previously, that's now limited at $10,000. For Massachusetts as a whole, something like 3 out of 8 taxpayers actually used that deduction, and for richer communities like Southborough, that proportion is even higher. The average SALT deduction for Massachusetts taxpayers from the latest IRS data is about $15,000. So those folks are going to lose 2/3 of that deduction. They're going to pay taxes on an additional $5,000, which is a pretty substantial hit. And again, states that have high tax rates, Massachusetts is on that list, and towns or municipalities who have high property values and high property taxes, and Southborough certainly qualifies relative in Massachusetts to that, are going to take a real hit. And I haven't done the math on it, but I think that's an interesting number that we ought to look at in terms of the impact from that particular effect. The other side of that is that federal tax rates for businesses have dropped dramatically. The marginal tax rate used to be 35% at the highest level. That goes down to 21%. Not quite that much of an impact for the smallest businesses, but overall, businesses are going to pay a lot less tax now. So in fact, if one wanted to try to balance that effect a little bit, we have an opportunity here to say, let's use the split tax rate to actually have businesses pay more, which net they might not wind up paying more because of the lower federal taxes, and residents, many of whom are going to pay more because of the limited SALT deductions, could use a little break. And as I talk to a lot of people in town, particularly senior citizens, people are concerned about tax rates, and people are saying, I'm having a hard time hanging on to my house because property taxes are high. Here's an opportunity, again, to give a little relief to people and not, in theory, wind up with a huge net impact on what people pay in taxes. So I think that calculation would be an interesting one to look at. And from a policy standpoint, I think it makes some sense to consider this year, particularly with that federal tax law change, to think about doing things a little differently here. So that's my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Robbins.
Yes. Good evening. In response to Mr.
Excuse me,
Stiver's-
Chris, can you just name and
I'm
address,
sorry.
please?
Thank
Sorry.
you. Chris Robbins, 39 Parkerville Road. It was an excellent presentation. Paul does a very thorough job of explaining why we have a single tax rate. And this issue was brought up in terms of Mr. Geyer's position and Mr. Stiver's position in terms of having a split tax rate. Well, when this happened about almost 5 or 6 years ago, that thesis or presentation of Mr. Geyer's was presented to the state's top economist, Mike Goodman, Dr. Mike Goodman, who I actually worked with at the Donahue Institute in the president's office. And he presents the state's economic report to the State House and to the governor. And his feedback to not only Mr. Geyer, but to us, is that we do have two-thirds of the town, more than two-thirds of the towns and cities who have voted in favor of that rate because it is a fair tax, and that he reminded Mr. Geyer that he's not an economist and he doesn't understand the numbers and the algorithms that are calculated to create this formula for how the tax rates are decided. So here we have the state's top economist, and then also this information was sent to Carolyn Dykma, our state representative, who also agreed in essence that the towns have the right to choose their tax rates, and that the overwhelming majority of towns and communities, the people who govern our communities, have the common sense understanding of what a fair tax means to enabling us to compete. And that's the new notion that most of us don't think about. We just think about collecting taxes and paying the bills and don't realize what the really long-term implications of raising taxes on business does to job creation. And the big debate in Washington is that business tax was so high that businesses were leaving this country and we lost thousands of jobs. And as a result of that tax reduction, I know these are two different fields, but it actually changed the ability for companies to return and start hiring more people. But Southborough also is competing regionally and statewide for jobs. And communities that have the single tax rate are going to have an advantage, and that's why businesses will move. Matter of fact, when this debate came up again a few years ago, there were business CEOs who wrote letters to this board indicating that they would move if this new rate was here. And I know EMC has been here on a regular basis, and I think has always been in favor of the single tax rate, and they're a major player in our local economy. While they don't exist here, they create jobs of people who live and work here. So, and the other thing is this idea of a new tax on business was put before the town meeting, and overwhelmingly the community voted against this unfair proposed tax. So, and just in summary, I want to focus on, we have several hundred businesses in this town, and many of them, I think approximately 10 or 20 of them, including the nonprofits, do commerce all over the world. We don't think about this, but the nonprofits are the largest employers, and they are now building campuses. I think Faith School's got a new campus going in China. The Autism Center is building in Dubai. We have Harvard University here. And we have businesses like Mitsubishi from Japan, right across from the transfer station. We have Olympus, one of the largest Japanese conglomerates that make medical devices. And we have small manufacturing companies like Protonics, who make batteries for the military, employ about 50 people. And we have Device Technologies that's been here for several years that employs about 20. And they compete all over the world. But when you create an environment that's going to impede their ability to compete, we are going to suffer, and our ability to ensure our economic, long-term, social, and environmental wellness will be impacted. So I propose that the Board of Selectmen, and the wisdom of other towns and communities, continue the single tax rate. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else from the audience? All right, thank you. All right, do we have a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Further discussion?
It's a general statement more than a discussion. I think when we go down this exercise for next year, if you could extend an invitation to Mr. Geyer and maybe Mr. Stivers to be part of the discussion when the assessors start meeting.
Our meetings are obviously open.
I understand that, but I
Anybody can
mean,
attend
I would just
and
tend
make
to
comments, but really, you know, Sam comes up and speaks here, and, you know, he's kind of right speaking in front of you. The decision lies with you. Board of Assessors don't even have to make a recommendation, and Sam's doing exactly what he needs to do, is if he feels it's something that, you know,
No, I understand
feels
that,
strongly,
but
it's
I'm just
it's up.
suggesting that
Anybody
next year in the
can-
process, we have 2 citizens in town that follow this exercise every year and comment. It might be helpful. Thank you.
All right. Are we ready? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we support the recommendation of the assessors on the single tax rate.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we also need to, the residential exemption. Do we have a motion to,
I will move that we not implement the residential exemption.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and lastly, the small commercial exemption.
I will move that we do not implement the small commercial exemption.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you. Again,
Thank you.
thank you, Paul, and the assessor's office.
Just a reminder, Madam Chair, can you
Yes.
sign the paperwork? Shuffle it down to your left.
Absolutely.
We'll be out of your hair.
While we're doing this, Mr. Purple, if you wouldn't mind reading the 7:30, I'm sorry, 7 o'clock hearing.
Southborough Board of Selectmen shall hold a public hearing Tuesday, October 2nd, 2018, 7 p.m. in the McAuliffe Hearing Room at the Southborough Townhouse, 17 Common Street, Southborough, Mass. to consider a petition by Mass Electric Company, National Grid, and Verizon New England Incorporated to install joint-owned pole and anchor P38-51, 900 plus or minus cable, and 2 pole boxes to serve the new development at Dairy Farm Lane. All interested parties are encouraged to attend. Southborough Board of Selectmen, September 18, 2018.
Thank you. Do we have anyone, Mike Parent? Hi, Mike, would you mind stepping up to the mic, please? Introducing yourself.
Good evening, my name is Michael Parent. I work for National Grid out of the Hopedale office. I'm here on behalf of this poll petition. I didn't design this job, but I'm here to answer any questions engineering-wise, but it appears that the electric primary feed ends here at this pole 38-50, and to get it down to where this new development is, we'd have to come across the road and then go underground approximately 900 feet with pole boxes to pull the wire underground. And I believe that the town had not mandated it, but asked that we do it this way underground in this section.
Okay, thank you. I believe that was requested of the Conservation Commission, that it be done this way. I may be incorrect, but I think, okay, yeah. So, thank you very much for coming. My question was already answered regarding whether it was going to be undergrounding or not. Any questions, comments from the board?
I have none.
Mrs. Faniff, none? All right. Do we have a motion?
We need to close the hearing
Oh,
first?
sorry.
Or actually, I don't know if there's any comment.
Yeah. Is there any public comment? Sorry. Okay. Do we have a motion to,
I move that we close the public
Thank you.
hearing.
all in favor?
Aye.
Further discussion, comments? And otherwise, do we have a motion on the floor to, hold on 2 seconds, to approve the petition from Mass Electric Company, National Grid, and Verizon to install joint-owned pole and anchor P3851, 900 plus or minus cable, and 2 pole boxes to serve the new development at Dairy Farm Lane?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you for coming. All right, next up is Ryan Donovan from the Library Director for an update on the operations and flood remediation. Welcome, Ryan.
Hi, everyone.
And you have a smile on your face, and we appreciate that. And you have the floor.
Hello. I am Ryan Donovan, the director of the Southborough Library. I'm here to provide a brief update about the library. I know that you were eager to probably get an update about the current status with the facilities department concerning flood remediation. But I would like to first provide a brief update on our newest full-time staff member, new fall library program initiatives, and to request your involvement with the library's strategic planning update. I'd like to thank the Board of Selectmen for inviting me to come here tonight, and would like to quickly note and thank several of the library trustees for also attending this evening. If they could just quickly maybe stand. They're excited about that. This past July, the library was proud to welcome Aileen Sanchez-Himes, the new assistant director and young adult librarian. Aileen joins us from the Waltham Public Library with over 14 years of municipal experience. She has helped the library already in a number of ways, including a new bi-monthly Saturday chess program and a teen book club on the last Tuesday afternoon of every month. Also, brand new is our monthly cookbook club. Our staff member Mariana selects a cookbook every month, and participants bring in a prepared food item from a recipe every second Wednesday of the month. For more library programs, please visit the library's Facebook, Twitter, or our website. Starting tonight, the library is formally requesting initial community feedback for a 2019 strategic planning update. A library community survey is available on the back table adjacent to tonight's agenda. Copies will also be available at the library until around Thanksgiving. I hope that you will all consider filling a survey out, and residents that do submit completed surveys will have their overdue library fines waived. That's incentive, guys. I am also hoping at least one or two members of the Selectmen will consider joining the library's new strategic planning committee that will meet in early spring 2019. You can feel free to contact me at some point after the meeting if you're interested. But probably the number one thing you all want to hear about. The library experienced a significant flood on our ground floor on the morning of September 18th. Water levels reached as high as 6 inches in our Eaton meeting room. The library has been working very closely with Facilities Director John Parent, who is a saint, on flood remediation efforts. At this time, we have no time frame on when we can reopen the children's room and our 2 downstairs meeting rooms. No books or materials were damaged as a result of the flood, so good news, I guess, if there can be any. A temporary children's space has been opened upstairs on our main floor. Library programs, with the single exception of our Lego events, will continue as scheduled upstairs. If you guys have any questions or comments, I'm happy to answer them.
Well, first, Ryan, thank you again for coming. I think it's a great opportunity to let the public know that you're still open. You know, it's business as usual at the library, even though with the unfortunate circumstances, you know, that my understanding is you haven't really lost any programs, or all programs are running as planned, just in a little different way to make it happen. So thank you for shifting and still being able to serve the public. I greatly appreciate that. I see Mr. Parent is here. If you have anything to add, if you don't, that's fine too, as far as, you know, a status update. I think Ryan covered it fairly well. I know you've got a lot of things you're working on, and I'm sure we're going to have you in at a later date for a complete update on, you know, what the plans are and how we plan to address this. So anything you'd like to add, or are you good? You're good. Okay. Any comments from the board? Mrs. Faniff?
Who's working with the insurance company? Who's the lead person on this?
Mr. Parent.
And
the
probably
director.
myself, yeah. I would say John and I are talking every day, multiple times a day at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
Did we plug the hole?
Yeah.
I mean, like, is it leaking now?
It is not. It was, I mean, again, I think we're looking at doing some possible engineering studies to see what can be done long-term. In 2015, After the last flood in 2009, because as many of you recall, this has happened before, the trustees commissioned an engineering study, and there were several short-term and long-term recommendations. So I actually worked with John and with Karen Galligan my first year on the job, and we implemented many of the short-term recommendations. There were French drains that were installed under the hill. I don't know if you guys remember the construction. It took several weeks. There were also sump pumps that weren't functioning. They're functioning now. The problem really lies, at least it did on Tuesday, with the amount of rain that was coming down. There was just such a high volume, and it was the speed. So many people thought, I think after the last flood, that this problem had been corrected. I can tell you that the library is essentially at the bottom of a gigantic catch basin. So we need to sort of see what can be done long term. I can tell you that the problem has not been 100% corrected. We're looking at what we can do in the future.
Thank you.
So are we anticipating something at town meeting? A warrant article?
Possibly.
Okay.
John and I right now are working just on the logistics of trying to reopen the building, but I see him coming up now, so.
I don't want to get into too much detail because at this point I'll be giving you answers that are not solid. Currently working with Weston and Sampson engineers. We are looking at trying to devise a way that even with Mrs. Galligan's corrections in the street, in case there is additional overflow, we can deal with that so it ends up in a different location rather than in the library. I'm going to be doing another walkthrough next week with Weston and Sampson. Looking at a couple different ideas right now, like I mentioned. We have one that seems promising. Don't want to get into any details in case it doesn't pan out. But if that works, I would like to try to get something on the town meeting for that. I mean, honestly, we don't want to do this again. The amount of water that was coming in was absolutely ridiculous. We had current in a room. So we're taking this really seriously. This is #1 priority right now. So we definitely want to clean this up and make sure we can minimize any possibility of this ever happening again.
And no books or materials were damaged as a result of the flood, but about 90% of the furniture downstairs was destroyed. So we're looking at replacing all of that, and that's pretty significant for us. So just in trying to do an inventory, that has taken us a lot of time.
Well, I would think anytime there's an insurance claim, the expectation would be that it's fixed.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Again, in this case, fixed to the best possible extent, given the location of the library.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Mr. Shea? All right, gentlemen, thank you. I appreciate it.
Have a good
And
evening.
thank you.
Thank you to the trustees for coming as well. Next up, Mr. Hagerty, Jim Hagerty, Town Clerk, update on early voting. Mr. Hagerty, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. I know you've got a full plate tonight, so I'm going to keep this very brief, but thank you for letting me come into your busy schedule tonight. I got a couple of comments to make about the early voting that the state legislation was passed for the November 6th state election. There's a lot of confusion out there because people question why we couldn't vote in September, yet you could in November. It's up to the legislature. There's no, honest to God, rhyme or reason as to why it played out this way. But what's going to happen between Monday, October 22nd, and Friday, November 2nd, any Southborough voter can come downstairs to the clerk's office and vote early. It's very simple. All you have to do is come in person, sign and date an envelope, mark your ballot, and that's it. There's no other paperwork. There's no form. It's fast. It's simple. We're going to hold it downstairs, the same place we held it for the 2016 presidential election in the foyer. Why? 2 reasons. Number one, we really don't have any other place in town to hold this. And if we held it in some place other than this building, we'd have to hire a police officer for the detail for that. And that's about $7,500. So we'll do it downstairs. We'll try to do it with as minimum disruption to the townhouse. People will be able to early vote. The normal hours the townhouse is open, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8 to 5, Tuesday, 8 to 7. But we're also going to stay open on both Fridays until 5 o'clock, and we're going to stay open on Saturday, October the 27th, from 8 o'clock until 6 in the afternoon. All this will be posted on the town website in the morning. So here's for the confusing part. In addition to early voting, people can also absentee vote. You know, it's sort of like Coke or Pepsi. There's really, think of early voting as absentee voting without excuses. To absentee vote, technically, you either have to be out of town that day, you have to have a medical reason or a religious reason. You can early vote just because you want to come in and say hello. You can early vote because it fits your schedule, or you can choose not to. You can choose to go to the Trotter Gym. We'll be open on Tuesday, November 6th from 6:30 in the morning till 8 at night. But if it's more convenient for anybody, just come on in downstairs and we'll get you out of here in a couple of minutes. One final request. One measure of projected voter turnout is the number of absentee ballots that have been requested. And we got the ballots in yesterday, I believe, or Friday, I forget which day now. Anyway, they all went out in the mail today, all 98 of them, which is a lot, which should indicate we'd have a pretty good turnout. And with all the news in D.C., people more interested in elections, and in addition, there've been an awful lot of questions we've received about the 3 ballot questions. We think we'll have a pretty substantial turnout. But we ask people, please take the time to read the 3 ballot questions. It's included in the red packet that the Secretary of State just mailed everybody's home. Those are complicated questions, and they're lengthy, and it would really help speed the process along if people took the time to read them. We're hoping they will send us extras we'll have downstairs. We should get them next week, and that's pretty much about it. As soon as the state sends us sample ballots, we'll put them up on the website and on the town, but we have not received them as yet. So, anyone have any questions for me?
Thank you. So, Jim, what are the dates going to be for the early voting?
Sure. It starts on Monday, October the 22nd,
Okay.
and it runs through the following Friday, November 22nd. So basically 2 weeks. We'll be open every day except for that Sunday.
And on Fridays, you'll be open till 5?
Till 5
And
o'clock.
Saturdays?
Until 6.
Oh, so,
Yeah, we'll be open the Saturday, 8 to 6, just figure we'll catch people leaving the transfer station,
okay,
hopefully. And we'll have signs out around town as well announcing this as well.
okay.
Okay.
Anything further? Questions, comments?
Okay.
Wonderful.
Excellent.
Thank you for coming and for
Thanks
the
letting me come
update.
in. Thank you.
All right, next up, Recreation Committee Volunteer Interview and Appointment. Donald Dumont, term 6/30/20. Mr. Dumont, please step forward. Thank you for coming. Thank you for volunteering as well. If you want to just take a couple seconds or as much time as you'd like and just kind of give us a little bit of your background, and we'll fire a few questions at you. Thank you.
So my name is Don Dumont. I live on Overlook Drive. Been in the town since 2005. For the last 4 years, I've been coaching my kids in soccer. They play basketball in the winter in the gyms, and then the spring they also do baseball and softball. So I've gotten to see a good chunk of the town that way, as well as other towns in the community. Earlier this year, I saw the Recreation Committee working hard to sort of elevate the issues around the fields and what we can do to improve them. And a number of the issues are related to investing in them in the future and maintaining them. My background is in finance, so over 20, almost 20 years of, well over 20 years of experience in the finance area. So some of the presentations I saw and some of the issues looked like it drew a lot of questions in those areas, and I have expertise in those areas, as well as an interest in making sure that the fields are maintained and in good condition for our kids today and the kids in the future. They contribute to the value of the town now and into the future as well. And I thought I had an opportunity there to maybe give back a little bit. And as the space opened up, I thought I'd give it a shot and see if I could help.
Wonderful, thank you. I had the pleasure of actually attending a Recreation Commission meeting, and Mr. Dumont was there, and he was a very active participant in the capital discussions that were taking place that night. And I think you will bring a great value to recreation as far as diversity on the board and having all bases covered. You fully have my support. I think you'll do an amazing job, and I think you'll bring another dimension that's needed. So, questions, comments from the board? Mrs. Faniff.
Thank you for stepping forward. As you can see, we don't have a long list of people stepping forward for anything these days. I agree with what Mrs. Brashear just stated. I did read your small summary here. Welcome.
Thank you.
To the town, and Yeah, I'm sure you'll be prepared, like all of us, for town meeting. It's a great time to step in and use your expertise.
Thank you.
No, again, thank you for stepping up and volunteering. I think your background will be a tremendous addition to that group, and give my full support as well.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. I'm just curious if we have any input from REC.
We did, actually. Kristen, the chair is here. If Kristen, do you want to step forward for a second? And I know you guys took a position on this, so I'll let you speak.
We did. It's been actually a really pretty tremendous month to 2 months since Mr. Nixon joined us, and then Mr. Dumont stepped forward. We actually have had the opportunity to have not one but multiple conversations that they've both participated in, and to your point, it's really rounds out. It's fresh voices at the table, fresh ideas that I think we welcome, and I'm sure others will welcome as well. So we 100% support it, and we're very excited.
All right.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a tremendous, I think, a tremendous benefit. You all bring very good things, everyone does, on a committee forward, and I think he fills a piece that actually is great to be filled in, and as Mr. Nixon as well was also a very valuable member. So I think you've got a great commission going forward to do the work that you want to do, so.
Definitely agree.
All right,
Make a motion to appoint Mr. Dumont to Recreation, term ending 6/30/20.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Welcome. You'll get a letter from the Selectmen's office, and you can, within 14 days? 14 days, you can get sworn in, and then you can become an
Do
active
it
member.
right now.
Yeah, no, actually, Jim's right here. Wonderful. Again, thank you. Thank you for stepping forward.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, next up, Fire Chief Screening Committee, volunteer interviews and appointments. Let's see. We had 6 people step forward. One has since had a commitment that came forward, so they have pulled their name from it. So we have 5, and I believe everybody's here. So if we could have Mr. Stivers, Ms. Maney, Mr. Kendall, Mr. Malinowski, and, I said Mr. Stivers, did I? Mr. Boland. Mr. Boland, sorry. You were at the back of the tail. So if you guys want to come forward and take a second and just kind of take a turn, go down the line, kind of give us a little bit of background. Most of you we already know, but just to give us a little background on yourself and for those maybe watching and why you'd like to step forward.
Oh, so I grabbed the mic first, so I guess I got to go first. Yeah. So Jason Malinowski, I submitted a letter to you. I think all of you are familiar with my work as chair of the Public Safety Building Committee. When this opportunity opened up, I, put a letter into all of you, which I think is pretty self-explanatory, but I think my balance in the private sector as a CPA and obviously my part-time employment as a firefighter in a neighboring community would bring valuable attributes to this committee to kind of create a balance and bring you, obviously, a diverse group of candidates that's a balance between what the community is looking for, but also take into account the interests of the department as well.
Thank you.
Sam Stivers, I think most of you are familiar with my background. I've been in town over 20 years. For most of that time, been volunteer on various town committees. Interested in this one for a variety of reasons. I think as an advisory committee member for a number of years, I think I've gotten to understand a lot of the fire department activities and budget and so forth. Also understand the impact of the fire department activities on the overall town budget, which I think is an important overview. I think it's useful to have a mix of people on the committee as it appears to be headed toward, as far as people who understand the sort of the professional aspect of firefighting, as well as people who are looking at it from an overview standpoint in terms of town interests. I've actually done consulting in the past for public safety and fire, so it gives me some understanding of that as well. And I think that, again, it's useful to get a variety of inputs to this, and I think in this group of applicants you've got a good mix, and so I would hope that you'd wind up with a balance of people who represent all views in town, and out of that, I think, comes a stronger set of recommendations. So I look forward to the opportunity to serve on this. Thank you.
Hi, Janet Maney. I know you all. I'm glad to see as well that there's this number of applicants, because I think it'll give you a committee that's has wide range of skills and whatever. I'm coming to this from the standpoint of being a 30-year fan of the department. I don't think I've ever had an interaction with the fire department that wasn't positive, skillful, pleasant. And it's been under a number of different leaders through the years, so I think we want to keep that reign going. I bring a lot of knowledge of the town and committees from a management standpoint, and a background in recruiting, trying to find the best people and skill set to match the needs of the department and the needs of the position.
John Kendall, 5 Cottage Street. I was on the department for 28 years, retired as a lieutenant. I was also a recruit instructor at the Fire Academy for 17 years, so I have training and the service side of the fire department to bring to the committee. Is hopefully selecting the next chief.
Thank you. Mr. Boland.
My name is Bill Boland. I live at 35 East Main Street. I'm very familiar with the fire department. There's been 4 generations of Bolands on the fire department in Southborough and in other places, none currently working in fire departments. I was a member of the Board of Selectmen for 9 years, having participated in hiring the current fire chief and the last 2 police chiefs, as well as many current and former department heads. So I'm very familiar with how the process works. Assessment centers have sat in through assessment centers for all those positions, and feel I could add a lot to the committee through my previous experience. I'm a good judge of people and know, I think, what it would take to hire a new fire chief. However, I would put out that it shouldn't be up to the committee per se without proper guidance from the Board of Selectmen, who first determine what you're looking for in a new chief and what direction you feel you'd like to see the department go, rather than us try to hire somebody and then you figure out where you want to go.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, thank you for all stepping forward. It's nice to see when a vacancy comes forward, because we do have so many on other boards and committees that it's nice to see that the public is taking this serious, and we've got some really great people stepping forward. So thank you. I will open it up to the board for questions for any of our interviewees. Mrs. Faniff.
May I call you Jason? Yeah. What would you say the similarities are with the department that you volunteer for?
There's career staff, part-time staff. To be clear, I am compensated. I don't volunteer. Just, okay. I would say in my interaction, we have career command staff, per diem command staff, which is what I fall under, and the chief, is expected to be somewhat on call to support. We have 4 people on duty at a time. Southborough is 5.
Volunteers?
No.
No. Does Foxborough have a volunteer fire department?
It's staff per diem.
Okay.
And there's callback. So when they do anything on 495, for example, it's a department callback.
Thank you.
Mr. Shea?
So I want to thank all of you for stepping forward as I got the packet and saw the list of applicants through it. I know we have 5 altogether on the committee. 2 positions are taken already, and I was kind of hoping that let me just see 3 good names so I don't have to make any tough decisions, but I've got, and there were actually 6 excellent candidates that stepped forward. So, I think no matter who we choose, we're going to have an excellent committee. I think we have a tough decision ahead of us. So that's the only comment I'll make now.
All right, thank you.
I'm just curious how you feel about hiring from outside or within for a position like this. Specifically with our department and general in theory.
Well, without seeing the needs assessment that, I don't know if it's already been put together or would be, I think the department's very well thought of. So I think internal applicants have a leg up based on that they've had good experience, good leadership, whatever. I think you always compare to outside as well to keep yourself honest when you're looking at candidates. But why wouldn't we look at people who've served the town well in the past if they're interested in the position?
Yeah, I agree with Janet. I think you got to look carefully at internal candidates. On the other hand, ultimately, I think you need to look hard at what you need in terms of that position and assess all the candidates, internal and external. And if, in fact, if someone in the external pool shows up head and shoulders above the rest, I think it's hard to reject that result. If the decision is very close, it seems to me you got to give the nod to the internal candidate who knows the internal workings. But hard to predict, again, without sort of having a good sense of what the pool looks like and what the needs are as the selectmen determine and as the committee works through the process, and the assessment center process will have opinions on that as well. So
I think Mr. Boland was spot on in terms of the direction the board wants whoever you appoint to take. In terms of, I think once you define what your job description is, and you've vetted, I'll call it the constituents, that would, I think, better inform the internal external decision. I do think in general it's nice to have a comparison, because I think it allows you to draw comparisons of internal leadership, external leadership. And I think you need to assess whether you're looking for, is the culture good and you're just trying to continue that, or are you trying to make a wholesale change? That's really the direction I think starts with you, and then the committee would take it from there.
I'm just going to echo what they said. They covered all the ground, and I agree with it all.
Fair enough. Mr. Boland, back to you.
If you wanted to spend the time and the money, my opinion would be that the selectmen do an appraisal of internal candidates in the department first, determine if you feel you may have a very strong candidate inside the department before going outside. We have developed a reputation for a bias toward internal candidates through our last 3 public safety hirings. And if the opinion is out there, like it had been in some of the previous things, that it's an inside job, they're just going through the motions, you won't get a good pool of candidates. So I know some other towns have done it different ways. Framingham, for their police chief, just hired, and for several of the last ones have hired within the department. It can get a little embarrassing sometimes if you decide at the end an internal candidate isn't getting advanced, and then all of a sudden almost change the rules to do that. I think some of you are familiar with some of the things that happened through our last thing. I'm a person that says let's hire the best candidate, but if he's there, why spend the money to go outside? We've in the last 3 things I voted for an internal candidate once and external candidates twice. So I'm pretty much have a track record of looking at the best people and going from there. And I think that's what you should do. But you want to make sure you do not put the impression out there that it's going to be an internal candidate, so people don't bother attending. I think you have to establish what your criteria is for what level in a department you're looking for to be able to qualify for the position, whether it's a lieutenant, a captain, a deputy chief, and understand that within different departments, those ranks have significantly different positions within local departments. So again, I think it's, I know I could do the job asked of me. It's just the best thing is if I'm on this committee, you tell me this is what we want. This is where we're going. We've polled the department to see what they think they'd be looking for in new direction for the department, because it could very well be a significantly new direction in a brand new facility that you're going to go forward with.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have just a question as well. Southborough is a small town, as we all know, and it's just kind of, as you've alluded to with, past appointments and such. Do any of you feel that you have a potential conflict for any reason whatsoever in being able to do this, whether it be, I don't know, you serve on a fire department or, a family member or whatever. I just would like you to be able to respond to a question that may come as to you being able to be impartial and do, I mean, at the end of the day, we all want to do what's best for the town. I don't think there's any question of that. You wouldn't have stepped forward otherwise. But I know, the questions have been asked of me, so I'm going to ask them. Do you give you an opportunity to respond to anyone that may question whether you all can be impartial?
Yeah, I would say for me, no. The only potential conflict would be if someone who was related to me applied for the position. I don't anticipate that happening. I know probably at least 3/4 of the firefighters personally. I don't have any favorites or anything else.
Thank you.
Given you called my situation, I'd say I only know the firefighters in Southborough by name, so from an internal candidate perspective, I know them by name and that's about it. Externally, the only conflict I would have would be if someone from my own department were to apply. I am not aware of any individual, but should that happen, then I would take the proper steps. I think you kind of know how I've gone about the public safety building and haven't had any issues to date. So that would be the only perceived thing I can think of.
Okay. And the comment wasn't to offend anyone or anything sitting here. It's
Question you have
just,
to ask in
once this came out, I received some questions from people, so I would be doing a disservice to the public if I didn't ask them and give you the opportunity to respond, because it may clear up any misconceptions that there may be. So, Mr. Stivers.
No preconceived notions and no conflicts.
Ditto.
My son's a firefighter, paramedic in the department. However, I don't think this would be a conflict because I know he won't be applying for the job.
All right, thank you. Any further questions before we discuss? I guess that's a no. All right, thank you very much, and now we will discuss. Thank you. I guess I will start the discussion. Actually, Mr. Purple, thank you.
So just to frame the discussion for the board, so you created a screening committee made up of 5 members. There are 2 positions that you slotted. One was the current police chief, so Chief Paulus will sit on this committee. Obviously, being roommates in the new facility right now, they just share a parking lot. Hopefully, in another 10 months, they'll share a building for many, many years. The second was a public safety official, hopefully a fire chief. And I'd like to thank Chief Morrow for his assistance. Marlborough Fire Chief Kevin Breen has stepped forward. He's obviously currently the fire chief from Marlborough, been a firefighter for more than 30 years, began his career back in '86 in Salem, New Hampshire, worked through the ranks of the Salem department, eventually was promoted to chief, held the position for almost 10 years before he came to Marlborough. Masters of Science degree in management and numerous certifications as a firefighter, instructor, hazmat tech, advanced EMT, and also taken numerous courses in the National Fire Academy. So I think he's eminently qualified, to help be a member of the committee. Yeah, it'd be great if he applied. But we'll take his expertise in helping to find someone. So those are the two positions. So essentially, you have 5 candidates that you need to select 3. So I just thought it'd be better if I framed the discussion so you know what you're being asked to do this evening.
All right, thank you, Mr. Purple. So I don't know if I guess the best way to do this, I don't want to say straw poll, but just try to get an idea of where everybody stands. I mean, again, I think we have 5 great candidates before us. I don't think the town can go wrong in any way that we choose to go. So I don't know if there's somebody that's stronger, and then others for discussion, or kind of the board's thoughts. I can certainly happy to give my thoughts. I think that Mr. Malinowski, based on the service that we see from him on the Public Safety Building Committee and what he brings forth, I think would be a huge addition to this committee. I think his background certainly helps as well from both the CPA standpoint as well as his firefighting background as well. I think it brings a level of diversity. So that would be a strong choice for me. I don't know what the board's thoughts are on that. Again, I think we have great candidates step forward. I think Mr. Boland also brings where he's sat in on this process and the assessments before, and I think he's proved that he can make an impartial decision, as he did with not necessarily the popular decision. So that holds a lot of weight with me. So then the tough choice is there's 3 people left for 1 seat. So
I'll just say that I completely agree with your assessment on the first 2 candidates. And as a way to, I think, help round out all the background and experience, I think one other candidate that stood out to me anyways was Ms. Maney with the HR experience that she brings. But she also has a number of years' experience with the advisory committee as well, and has participated in a number of other committees in town. I think she has a good background from a town perspective and professional perspective to be a positive addition to that group as well.
okay, thank you. Mrs. Faniff?
Jason definitely has the experience I think they were looking for and his involvement in the community. I did look up the town of Boxborough. That wasn't a trick question. I was curious of the size of the town. And you're aware that we have a strong chief in our community under a strong chief. Okay, so again, I don't know if anyone on the committee knows what that is. It's the Mass General laws. Our fire chief has powers that are out of our control as far as hiring, reprimand, and all other things. The budget is the only thing that the town of Southborough has control of, and the appointment of the chief and the contract. So that's why I asked what size the town was. So Jason, I agree with. I also agree with Mrs. Manning. We do have a diverse fire department and police department. We have female firefighters. I think she could ask questions around that aspect of the department, what the department needs are in that area, and being a human resource person. I also feel Mr. Stivers has a strong background in the fire department budget, and he's been critical. He's also been part of the town manager discussion that we had. He understands the powers of the fire chief, the budget of the fire chief, the operation of the fire department with his years on the advisory board. I do not want to overlook that. I think that's a big component of how we move forward in that department. Mr. Boland is experienced. He's certainly sat here enough years. I'm not sure, but I know you still have family in the fire service, not immediate, but local. And Mr. Kendall, I know there could be some internal conflicts with you being on the selection committee. No fault of your own, but those things happen. I mean, it's a small town, and I really don't wish that on a family member. So that's my position.
With my review of the applicants and the answers here tonight, based on background, my choices were Mr. Malinowski, Ms. Manley, and Mr. Stivers. I do think, even though Mr. Kendall, you don't think it's a conflict, I do. So I apologize.
For me, for the third choice, it as well, this wasn't easy for any of us. I think there's great value to Mr. Kendall stepping forward, but I know, I've said to you, I worried that there might be a conflict as well. I wish there wasn't, because I think you bring great value, absolutely. I think Mr. Stivers, for me, brings tremendous value, and I think with his background as well, that if I had to pick a third choice, and again, Ms. Maney, this isn't nothing against you either. I think with your advisory background and your HR background too, we can't lose here. No matter what we do, we can't lose. But if I had to throw a hat in the ring for a third, I would throw it towards Mr. Stivers. So
with that, so I'll make a motion that we appoint Mr. Malinowski to the committee.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, welcome.
I'll make a motion that we appoint Mr. Sam Stivers to the committee.
Second.
Second.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I can't second, but, okay, never mind. Second? Sorry.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Fine. All right, 3-1.
I'll make a motion that we appoint Miss Janet Manning to the committee.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And I
Well-
would ask that the board,
Go ahead.
I would ask that the board also approve Chief Breen, the Marlboro chief, to sit on the committee, since Ken Paulus is hardwired into the charge, but the Chief Breen is not.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Again, thank you all for coming.
Thank you all.
Would have been easier if only 3 of you would have came forward. But again, the town couldn't lose, and again, thank you all so much. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
And we'll expect you to be sworn in as soon as you get your letter, so.
Do it tonight.
There you go, Jim is here again. He purposely stayed. All right.
Have an update?
Again, thank you. And Mr. Malinowski, put your other hat on now. And Public Safety Golf Project update.
Okay. So shifting gears a little bit. So I was before you just over a month ago with a pretty detailed project update. It won't be as long tonight, but there are, I think, important items for you to be aware of. The nice thing is most of them are very positive in terms of our developments. I will save kind of the discussion item that we'll kind of want some feedback from you on towards the end of my update. So I guess from a ceremony type perspective, on Heritage Day, there will be a beam on the fire department location for the public to sign. This will be the only opportunity for the public to sign the beam before it ends up on the building in the next 2 weeks. So if that is something that interests anyone, we've tried to publicize it as best as possible. That is out there.
Can you tell us what the hours for any of the public that's listening, Jason, when they can go?
We listed it as 11 to 4.
11 to 4 at the fire
At the current fire station.
Okay, thank you.
So it's meant to tie in with the Heritage Day activities. The contractor was nice enough to coordinate with Chief Morrow to actually get it up there, so we really didn't want people walking down towards that site for a variety of reasons, so.
And can you
that was-
just touch on where the beam, kind of the process of the beam and how it's going to be?
Chief, where did they end up putting it? So it's right next to the memorial out towards the gazebo side. So we'll be there. It'll be pretty easy to find. So then that Friday, so I believe that's the 12th, we will be doing a beam raising ceremony. It's at 7:30 a.m. All of you should have received notification from Mrs. Hale, put out a notice to the public. It's a very brief, probably a few quick speeches, much like the groundbreaking ceremony. Then the crane will lift the hopefully final beam onto the actual structure. The steel will rise from the ground over 2-week time period, starting like ASAP. The elevator shaft is in. So that's gonna kind of be our last, what I'll call ceremony or sort of event until we actually cut the ribbon to the facility. So it's a pretty exciting time, but then we're gonna have a lot of wait and see for a period here. If someone's questioning why 7:30, well, we really didn't want to incur the expense to do it off hours, and it's all union labor, so unless you wanted a change order or eating into the contingency, we felt it was most appropriate to do it then. We've coordinated with the school. The nice thing is they start at 8:50 next door, so we'll be out of their way by 8-ish. We've already notified the superintendent and the principal, and they've replied back. So I think we got all our bases covered there. Parking is extremely limited for any of you that have come down to the site. So to the extent that folks are not, don't have any mobility issues, we're advising to start at the senior center and leave some of those spots for those people that may not be able to make that walk. So again, it'll be very brief, and that will be next Friday, 2 weeks from this Friday. Actually, a week from this Friday. Got it. So in terms of overall project update, like I said, the elevator shaft is in, the steel will be up in 2 weeks. The entire foundation is in, the clubhouse has moved. There have been significant, and by significant I mean it's hours upon hours of conversations between the town, so mainly Mr. Purple and myself, CTA, our contractor, our design team, and our owner's project manager, trying to get that golf clubhouse officially situated. It, for being not even 1/15 of the cost of the overall project, is, when we look back, will have taken far more time than public safety. My view as the building committee chair, and key thing is public safety building committee, is that we have tried to keep a real tight deadline on making sure that public safety's interests aren't compromised by golf, while at the same time being as open as possible about what golf is feeling, incurring, etc. My understanding as late as 5 o'clock this afternoon, based on discussions with Mr. Purple, who actually walked the site today, and our owner's project manager, Vertex, is by Thursday we'll have a final complete plan to get that clubhouse fully operational. It was supposed to be done sooner, but given the phasing and some of the requests that have come in from the golf committee and the golf management company, we've been able to deal with those requests without compromising public safety and without compromising golf operations. And it's not impeding anything, so it was kind of one of those things that kept an open mind to, but it definitely is the 75% of the conversations. I've gone to a couple of the construction meetings. John Lyons from our committee sits in on most of those on a weekly basis. That's where a lot of the conversation and any tension that exists is all in that, just trying to make sure we get it right for everyone. So from a resident perspective, I actually received my first phone call of the entire project last week about just the noise. They've been hammering rock there for about 2 weeks. The resident that called me was incredibly cordial, pretty much a direct abutter to the site. And the good news is that hard pounding noise is supposed to be completed by this week. They did find a significant amount of ledge on the site. The good news is the allowance in the actual contract was almost enough to cover everything. So the biggest unknown that we walked into this project with was what in the world was under the ground there. While we do have change orders related to ledge, and I'll get to where we kind of stand from a budget perspective, they are pennies, compared to the overall project. So we are now rising. We're not underground anymore. The septic system should be operational in the next week. There's literally, my understanding is one component that needs to go into the electrical panel at Woodward that is causing it from not firing up. So we're literally down to one part that, I don't know where it's coming from, but is causing that to just not be operational. They've been in direct contact with the health director, and all systems look like they're going to be a go next week. So they'll actually be on the new septic field. From a cost perspective, our contingency has grown since we met you. It's not a dollar amount that's worth bragging about, but we actually haven't eaten into any of the contingency yet, both from a bid savings perspective, which we have no intention of ever touching, and the $2.1 million contingency that was basically sold to town meeting. We haven't touched that yet. Do not expect we're going to be turning in every dollar of the contingency. We know there's some things out there, but they're not eye-popping like, oh my, how did we miss this sort of thing? And even when we have found some things, there has been an offset. So we have had some pluses, right? Like the ledge, for example, but there's been equal and actually excess offsets. So from a financial position, the project is going exceedingly well. I think hopefully it'll be a model for future building projects for the town in terms of just the level of oversight. And I don't want to understate that because it's really a time commitment from a lot of different parties, both in the town, the volunteers, and externally in terms of our owner's project managers who essentially have a fiduciary, job to do for us too. But it's all of that kind of coming together that's really kind of keeping that in check and not me running back here saying, oh, we have a problem. So I continue to expect we're going to have a nice story. It's nice to be out of the ground because a lot of the things are going to be, slight touch-up finishes, or maybe the door handle doesn't look the way they expected it to look. That's what I'm hoping the type of items we're going to be discussing come the winter, and not big items like, oh, we found a lot of ledge. And just looking at the site and the ledge, I was shocked that, we had actually bid the right amount there, and our contractors had made the right calls there in terms of the allowances to give. So that was, I would say, a nice plus. In terms of project schedule, like I said, the golf clubhouse is kind of teetering along. The golfers are actually very happy in their temporary location, so that is nice and has been a nice benefit, but the lease on those rentals will be up, right? So at some point, so we're expecting that they will close down the season in that temporary place, and they will reopen in their new home come the spring. We are still working through logistics on how exactly they're going to access the parking, the new parking lot that's there. The parking lot's 95% done. They just actually have to put the gravel down, pave the handicap spaces, but there's a nice retaining wall out back. It's a pretty, you can kind of see it, how it's all coming together. And then the public safety piece, while there has certainly been discussions and the general contractor would always like more time, right? We are still on pace for July 1st of next year. That is the word I usually if anyone asks me a question, my response is July 1st, because we're really trying to make sure they understand that. So now to kind of the decision, or I guess, let me pause. Are there any questions on anything I've said thus far?
On the rocks.
Yes.
I think we got the call from the same individual. We're not going to crush that stone on site. Is that being taken off site, or are we going to crush it there too?
They're basically crushing it there.
How long is that process going to last?
We're told this week.
Okay,
And
thank you.
we have it in, when the resident called, especially given the way that they approached the situation, it made it very easy for me to then go to the contractor and say, hey, resident's not trying to cause trouble.
Right.
They're just asking these questions. So we've been told the end of this week.
Okay, thank you.
And we haven't blasted there, which. for
Now, the
obvious
resident was very,
Yeah. So I think when you approach
Cooperative.
things the right way, I just think people come together to try to rally around a solution.
From a noise perspective, and being out there for the construction meeting this morning, it's the hammering. It's not really it's not the putting the rock through the machine and crushing it. That's really not the noise. It's the hammering and that, and it's been probably a little bit more. I've questioned why they didn't just bring out the rubber mats and do a blast and be done with it. As Jason said, we've been very fortunate that in the areas of the building where we had to dig and put in foundations and put in footings, there was no ledge. It's the other areas where we're finding the ledge where, where it wasn't expected.
All right, and the other thing, Jason, I really want to thank your committee for having it televised. I think that the process itself is working. The town knows what's happening when it's happening, and they actually are on top of it. They're not here or they're not calling my home. One resident did, and I'm not aware of any other complaints.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Shea? No. One question, Jason. You said that the lease on the rental for the temporary home, I guess, for the golf, when is that lease up?
That is a really good question. Question I've asked about 10 times and haven't gotten the same answer. So we will get them through the golf season.
Okay.
With whatever we need to get them through.
Okay.
It was originally a 4-month, I know it was a 4-month term. I just have not gotten a clear answer of when that thing was dropped off.
Okay, thank
So-
you. And also, again, we say this every time, but thank your committee for the good work that they're doing, and, keeping the public abreast is really important. I mean, the town hasn't seen a project of this size potentially ever, So again, I think the transparency on this has been a really wonderful thing, and I commend all of you for it, so thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for the July 1st timeframe and staying on that.
Well, so now let me get to my
Uh-oh.
point of discussion.
Uh-oh.
So I'm hoping we've made it easier. When I heard about this last Tuesday, I kind of had a moment where I said to Vanessa, we should probably make sure this is very clear on the agenda, what we're talking about. It's public safety and golf. So the interaction of the two, like I said, has been very cordial. And I think we've been able to give in, so to say, to almost every request, because remember, my answer is July 1st. If it doesn't impact July 1st and there's not necessarily a cost associated with it, then, we find a way to work around it. We submitted an application this morning to National Grid. Actually, the check was cut at some point today. What that check does is now they have to design how to get the power from the road up to the site. And any of you that have walked the site, know that it's a decent amount of design work that has to be done. Depending upon what side of the road they actually put this pole on, will potentially impact golf operations in the month of November.
In its temporary location.
In its temporary location. Because remember, we have no ability, because of some of the changes that they've requested, we have no ability to move them up there for a month, for a number of logistical reasons that I won't take your time with. Depending on what side of the road this pole ends up on, and we have to rely on the professionals. We're certainly going to indicate our preference, but we're not going to jeopardize power to a public safety building for,
When you say side of the road, is this 85 that we're
no,
talking about?
literally the entrance driveway.
Entrance road.
So if we
Okay.
go up on the left side of the road,
Yep.
that doesn't go anywhere near the golf access. Right side, it will literally go right through their entrance to the temporary trailer. So for safety reasons, we would not be able to have people have the ability to access that. We also will lose decent amount of their parking, of where they're parking right now. So we don't have a definitive timeline, but they said it takes 4 to 6 weeks. So we're sitting here in the first month of October. That could start November 1st if they really had their eye on the ball. Could start as late as mid-November. But there is a potential, depending on what design they come back with, and again, we have no say in that. We have to rely on the experts, that we could have to either close the golf course for a couple of weeks early, because I think, Mark, the contract goes through November 30th.
November 30th.
And I'm sure there will be some financial component to that to make the employees whole. Or we can tell National Grid to wait till December 1st, at which time we're risking, obviously, schedule on their side. I can guarantee that they're not going to make guarantees in December, given weather. If it's anything like our past Decembers, we'll be lucky and a lot of progress will be made, but I don't know that anyone wants to buy that insurance. But more importantly, it's very reasonable to expect, if we delay the utilities and the ability for our contractor, who actually has to do the work to draw the line, once National Grid designs it, the contractor does the work, is how it was explained to me by our project manager. They're going to ask for an extension on the July 1st. Now, July 1st, obviously, is very important just to get our departments out of the facilities that are failing them, but it's also important because our contract with the architect expires July 1st, and our contract with the owner's project manager expires. Our run rate of those are approximately $60,000 a month. So the decision before you, now, I know how I would do it, so I'm trying to just present you all the facts, is you could spend $60,000 a month if we had to delay them, or in the unlikely event, but it's a possibility that we have to entertain this possibility that this power line is going to go through the site, compensating golf, which is not going to be $60,000 a month, to cease their operations a couple weeks early to keep us on track. So while this may never happen, and I don't want to raise any alarm bells, I thought it was prudent to bring it to you now. You don't have to make a decision tonight, but I think you're all here, it's on your agenda, I'm here. If we can get a general consensus, because then it'll be up to Mr. Purple to kind of start the dialogue with the golf community, if that does become a reality. Again, it may not become a reality, but it's better to bring it forward now.
Jason, when do we know when the design, I know you said 4 to 6 weeks, I assume that's to actually start the work. What is the time frame on having the design from National Grid, or is that the 4 to 6 weeks?
That's the 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay, so it's not necessarily start, but actually have the design.
Correct. So they think they'll have a design to CTA, our general contractor, in 4 to 6 weeks. CTA would have started yesterday if they could have. So
Okay.
Kind of convenient it takes National Grid some time, to be candid, but we do see this potential issue looming.
You may not know, if I may,
Mhm.
you may not know the answer to this. So we had a hearing earlier tonight to allow the installation for the new development off of Chestnut Hill Road. Do we need to have a public hearing for the work that National Grid is going to be doing to bring power into the golf course? Or because it's town property, is that not required?
No, it's it's our property, so it's not required, and it's coming off an existing pole. So, and it's coming in underground.
I think my understanding is it's how it travels up that driveway, whether it goes underneath and up the right side, or whether it kind of comes the left side and then cuts across.
And this is work, I would presume, that would be done during the week, during a regular work week?
They have been
and do we
working
have a-
Saturdays, which is allowed by the planning board. They were out there building the shaft this weekend.
Yep, I did see that. I'm just trying to get a sense of the impact, the true impact to the golf. And if the golf company has any data of how many players they typically get in November, how much of an impact is it really to them if the work could be done during the week, but access opened up weekends, if that's when they still get
Once the trench is
players?
open, it's open.
I think,
Could it be
lean toward
plated temporarily
keeping us
for a
on
weekend? Or?
track with our deadline and hope that it's not an issue, but if it is, that's the way I would go.
So I think, just to round out the discussion a little bit, Jason brings up, obviously it's an important issue, but there's a lot of variables that we don't know the answer to, which could make this a lot simpler. As Jason said, right now, the pole is on the right-hand side of the driveway going in, which if they ran the utilities straight off of that, would go right through the temporary trailer where we were housing the golf clubhouse. If it's moved over to the left side, it may not impact that clubhouse as much, and maybe there is a way to mitigate this. We also don't know how long the design is going to take. If it's closer to the 6 weeks, and again, not that I want to go back there, but you recall some of the discussions about undergrounding in Main Street, and and the timelines that we were being given from National Grid to design some of these things. 4 to 6 weeks depends on how busy they are. Bob Moran has been a great rep for us. Chief Morrow, who's here, has been a great conduit, no pun intended, to help get National Grid moving in our favor on some of these things. But again, they can only move so quick. So if it's 4 to 6 weeks, it's going to put us, probably into the back half of November anyway. The contract that we do have with the management company does say March 15th to November 30th. However, extenuating circumstances one way or the other, we can have discussions. So as soon as we know information, we can have those discussions. There was a brief conversation after the construction meeting today. Obviously, with the closing of Millwood Golf Course, it's pushed some of that golf traffic in our direction. The course has had a pretty good season. And, it depends on the weather as to when they open. Obviously, they wanted to open earlier this year. The weather didn't allow it. They'd like to go as long as they can. If the weather allowed it this year, usually by December 1, they're usually pretty much done. But again, once we know more details, we'll have a better idea as to what the actual impact of golf would be.
Can I ask a question about the trench? And Jason, I don't know if you know the answer to this. I'm assuming it's somewhat of an open trench. If there was a way for golf to continue, what is the liability to the town on potentially having an open trench and having golfers coming in and around it? I mean, to me, that's just...
So I was at the meeting last week. Mr. Purple and Mr. Lyons were there this week. I was told when I specifically asked that question, once that thing's open, we can't be near it. And you can't pick up, the way that the temporary trailer's set up, you can't just pick that up and like attach it to a trailer and move it to another side of the parking lot. I mean, there's facilities, linked up to that, especially power.
So for me, I think the choice is somewhat easy. We want to stay on the time frame, but at the same time, we want the safety of the golfers as well as anybody that might be accessing the site. So I would suggest to start a conversation with the golf now with the chance that this could become an issue instead of waiting 4 weeks and getting a design and saying, oh geez, you guys have to close now. I'd rather start a conversation now, see if it happens that the golf has to close early and get it worked out now versus waiting. So that's my thoughts.
Well, I think it's a little more than that. I think that there's a request here as far as the direction that we're gonna go in. And right now, public safety is a priority.
Yeah.
I mean, they're up against a winter schedule too. Whether we close the golf course or not, we're up against a winter schedule.
Yep.
So it needs, I'm speaking for myself, needs to be very clear that the installation of the power line from National Grid is a priority to this town to keep that schedule, and we are working on this schedule.
Yes, absolutely.
I agree.
So that's the direction of the board. Okay, so I will, in conjunction with Mr. Malinowski, have a conversation with Mr. Harrison, just to, as you say, put it on his radar until we have more details, but that, the board has determined that, we need to stay on schedule with the public safety facilities, so the running of the utilities is going to determine, and the location of that is going to determine golf's ability to continue all the way to the end of November.
Let me just ask one more trench question then. So if the trench is on the left side of the driveway versus the right, aren't we still somewhat faced with people coming in and accessing the public and there being an open trench? I mean, I don't know the safety requirements.
They seem to indicate there was a potential workaround.
Okay.
Whether it's viable,
Okay.
I think we'll find it. I think no one, right, because remember, the general contractor's the one with the insurance. No one is going to chance a situation like that when they have the direction that you've given, regardless of left side, right side of the driveway, right?
But I don't want to minimize the point that Jason's making either, is that, every attempt is being made and has been made to be the good neighbor to golf and to make sure that they can continue to function and be a viable course, as we talked about at town meeting, we've talked about since. And that has been the direction of this board, is to make sure that, that remains viable through the construction of the project. So all efforts are being made to ensure that that happens, and hopefully it's a decision that doesn't have to be made.
And then I'd say at your next meeting, you should have a contract to award for the solar canopies. The responses are due within the next couple of days. There's been some extensions due to some requests for information from certain vendors. My understanding was at least 12 companies have pulled papers. It doesn't mean they were going to return them, because my understanding is they all come in on the last day, but the interest is strong, so that's why I feel pretty confident that you're going to have something to look at. And remember, the contract was worded in such a way there's no cost to us. It's really a matter of how much they're paying to lease the land, which will then lead to the potential town meeting article to just ratify, or give you the authority to lease that section of land.
So just to follow up, the convoluted issue with a couple of good things. So as Jason alluded to, I was out there with a site walk today after the construction meeting. Chief Morrow, some members of our design team, golf superintendent, and the OPM also joined me. You'll notice, as he said, that the block has been completed for the elevator shaft. And you'll also notice there's a huge amount of staging. They're beginning to assemble the block for the wall in between the apparatus bay and the administrative offices side of the building. That should go up pretty quickly. There was also several deliveries of steel today. The crane was working actively to kind of take them and put them in various piles and where they need to be. As Jason said, based on the schedule and the anticipated topping off ceremony, that steel should go up pretty quickly. I believe they're starting on the admin side of the building and then working their way over to the apparatus bay. So again, you'll really start to see the shell of the building. So we've really gone, vertical now on this project.
One other thing, before this, last year we had a request before us to use the footprint of the field, the golf course, for outside activities during the winter months.
Yes.
I think before any scheduling takes place, that request comes to us soon, so we know if they even have access to that location at all, or at least put the word out there that it might be.
I think it's a different discussion and potentially a larger discussion this year, depending
Might be
on
off limits.
access,
Right.
depending on, a lot of issues. So it's not a wide open parcel with nothing going on as it was, last year when the golf operation ceased for the year. So I agree, it's a different discussion. If we can manage it, if we can find a way to do that, then absolutely, but
No, but if anybody's thinking of planning anything,
Yeah.
that discussion has to take place right now with you.
Yeah.
Because I'm not comfortable with having access on a
But
construction site.
at this point, I don't think that you could approve anything. Where we are in 2 months, or, around Thanksgiving, we start to get things, we'll have a better idea of where things are and what the ability is to do something. But no, obviously, as Jason said, the contractor holds a liability insurance.
Right.
He's not going to release anything if there's a concern.
But we don't want to disappoint people either if they're planning something.
Nope,
So
understood.
let's
I've
find
already had people asking, employees asking which day, for the Christmas holiday, so no, it's not too early to think about those things.
And finally, Southborough Access Media on Thursdays filming the site, and that will be posted. So anyone that's really anxious and wish they could get inside, they'll now kind of have a view. And I don't know exactly how regularly they're going to do it, but especially with darkness, even our committee having the ability to walk the site is going to be severely limited once we change the clocks, if not already.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, it's Kristen Lavault, Recreation Project and Capital Plan updates. All right. Thank you, Ms. Lavault, for coming. I know we've tried to coordinate this, and I had asked to wait, so thank you for coming forward and having everything for us tonight. And I look forward to your updates.
So we want to make this obviously more of a regular update, starting, kind of breaking it down into a few things, projects, programs, and then obviously capital planning. For projects, Karen, do you mind just giving a brief on what's funded already? Just the key updates on those.
So there's not a lot of progress going on. The Petrie Field, we have to do an NOI with Conservation Commission because it's directly next to wetlands. We hadn't anticipated that. They're planning on bid it, bidding it and doing the work in November, assuming that we can get the NOI done. Tri-tier track, that'll be handled, probably bid this winter, but with work being done in the summer, because the timeline's not good for the temperatures. As far as Lundblad Field goes, we've been in contact with DEP because they want to make sure that, with the way the cap is, they're considering it to be a significant change to the way we run the landfills closed by doing any work on there. So we need to get the permissions from there of what they'll allow us to do. And we have not gotten onto a planning board agenda yet for the Mooney lights and the tennis lights. We've gone back and forth quite a few times with the planning with whether or not it's a major site plan review. There's minutes from 2014 where the planning board said it wasn't. So I'm pretty sure we'll have the open discussion. We have all the stamped plans, but there's a couple things that we shouldn't need in order to get the approvals. But I think that's all we have running.
The only other thing mentioned to be scheduled, we have the remaining CPC funding to do the basketball court at Fayville Park. I think people are just kind of enjoying the park right now, finally. So, and then also we're looking at the Finn tennis courts. We did shut down the skate park due to safety concerns. Now looking at the cost of resurfacing it. Definitely still, I guess, an open question on whether that second court becomes a tennis court or perhaps repurposed for basketball. We've tried to hold a couple forums to get some feedback, haven't gotten a lot. I will say that we're meeting a week from tomorrow, which I believe is the 10th, where we're going to kind of make a final determination. So we'll put it out there once more to folks if they want to weigh in on that. I would say right now, the feedback we have got leans more heavily towards basketball. But once we nailed that down, that allows us to nail the estimate down. And then we're looking at two potential sources of funding. We did submit a CPC application, and also this could be an opportunity to apply some revolving funds as well. Also worth noting, and so Doreen Ferguson, our director, could not be here tonight, so I get the pleasure of kind of giving some updates that she would give, stealing her thunder a little bit, but yeah, we do want to acknowledge a lot of things that probably kind of go unnoticed. First, the Finn Playground updates that were recently completed. We want to mention the many hours given by Jen Hansen, Clayton Ryan, Tom McCabe, Doreen, working on this effort. Chuck Raimondo, especially on the installation and the support by DPW for the fill and clearing. As a result of this, there is a new climbing structure there and a section for approximately 2 to 4 year olds, so just a nice uplift to the playground. And then we want to recognize the funding contributions for that work, which were largely from SOS and Recreation and Friends of Recreation, and then the New England Recreation Group. So let me pause there and see from a project perspective if there are any questions for myself or Karen.
I just have one. The meeting that you reference on the 10th, is that a regular meeting or is it a forum?
It is a regular meeting.
Regular
so
meeting,
we're going to
okay.
be trying as a commission to move as best as we can support. I mean, obviously things come up to a regular biweekly schedule of Wednesdays. Our hope is to encourage more people to come and give their feedback rather than waiting to the larger discussions or town meeting. You know, if perhaps we have something more regular out there and we can publish the agenda more widely, it might encourage folks to come with their questions or concerns. So in that particular agenda, again, we really need to just kind of finalize our plan for that Finn court resurfacing, which is why I mentioned it tonight in case people have a particular interest in
No,
that.
that's great. And so that meeting will take place at the Recreation Center, at the Arts Center?
Yeah.
And
On Highland Street.
Highland Street, and a 7?
Generally 7 o'clock.
Generally
yeah.
7. So anyone who's interested can watch the agendas when it gets posted and
Exactly.
hopefully take part. Or if they have any questions or something in advance, they can, I'm sure, reach out to Doreen or,
Always.
yeah.
Or any
so,
one of us.
perfect, thank you.
Sorry, any other?
The favorite basketball is going to be when?
Karen, I mean, I know a lot depends on how these other projects stack up. One consideration we have in the timing of basketball would be spring, baseball. The little kids use that field a lot, so whether or not that would be a
So
disruption.
it's going to get done as soon as my paving contractor says they can do it. So I'm assuming I might be able to get it done this fall, and then that's great. If the contract runs out, then we just have to move the kids. Because I don't want the contract to die before, obviously, we get the work done.
Okay. And then the Mooney lights,
Yeah.
what do we need to do to get it on the planning board agenda?
Like I said, it's just the requirements specifically to be a major site plan approval include civil stamped plans versus the electrical plans that we have, and lighting stamped plans that we have, and structural stamped plans we have. The planner is looking for civil stamped plans and a civil engineer to do the LID calculation, which we're not near an acre with the amount of trenching. So I've gone back and forth a few times about that, and I'm gonna do the submittal without it, and just put back those minutes where they said it wasn't a major site plan requirement back from the first discussions we had with planning. Because they have enough information to have the discussion, and we have all the stamped plans. We have everything we need to actually build it.
So it should be on the next meeting?
Probably not the next, because there's a lot of packet to put together. So I've been printing a lot of plans. I think we'll probably have everything to them this week, and then I think they have 3 weeks because they have to send it to Fuss and O'Neill, and they have to do a posting, and then we have to mail letters. So it's they're probably meeting next week, so it'd probably be 2 weeks after that or so.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks, Karen.
Anything else?
And just on the Mooney lights, so the plans have been put together, at some point in time will go to planning board. Then that project will be put out to bid for construction, and that is?
So actually, that project was already put out to bid because we had ZBA approval, and I didn't realize we needed a major site plan. I thought we just were having I was told from the building inspector, we need to have a discussion, a public discussion. So now that we've been working, getting all the packs together and everything, that is bid. The bid will still hold, and the construction still can be this fall, which is actually the best time, fall or early winter, because that field can get damp. So, and then we'll be off it by spring.
The bids that we have for all the construction required?
Yes, everything. I have the electricals watching the work, and so we have an engineer doing all the project oversight, and we have a contractor doing soup to nuts on the construction. Like, there's no DPW involvement.
Thank you. Mrs. Vaniff?
Yes, yes, so we had already put the bid together back earlier with the electrical engineer. So that's already been bid and put out.
So you're reviewing, your office is reviewing
Yes,
the specs and everything. So when they start a project, it has your stamp that it's ready to go.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Just one other quick question, Kristen, if you may. You said you applied for CPC?
Yeah, applications were due, I think, sometime last.
Okay, and that's for Finn, for the
That-
tennis court, or?
Right, the
Okay,
resurfacing, and it's a range in cost. I think it's anywhere from like 14 to 20 or 22,000,
Okay.
depending on if you just resurface for tennis or if you decide to go basketball.
perfect. I just wanted to make sure that you had submitted it, and it's not something that's forthcoming, but you're already in the process, so.
Yeah,
Okay,
Lorraine did
thank you.
that. Okay, so,
Follow up to that?
Oh, yeah.
Are we talking tennis and basketball, or tennis, both?
That's the decision we
But
need to finalize.
It could be both.
It could either be 2 tennis or
Okay.
1 tennis, 1 basketball.
All right, the reason I ask, I was at a birthday party this week, and there was a conversation for parents of 8-year-olds that they were looking forward to a basketball court at Finn.
I think a lot of people
I think they've
are.
been to your meetings.
Yeah, it's missing on that side of town, and obviously then with the school being there, it could be a nice compliment.
Good.
All right. Yes. Okay, we're gonna take a second and talk about events and programs. I think every time we come here, it's been pretty heavy on the capital planning. So, again, I'm kind of taking some of Doreen's thunder here, but just a reminder to everyone, I think most of you know that a lot of what I'm gonna talk about now are done with literally 2.5 FTEs. So when you go through the list of everything that gets accomplished, it's pretty impressive what Doreen, Jen Horn, and Denise Mayer accomplished. Of course, with the help of a lot of folks within Youth and Family Services and the Friends of Southborough. So I'll try to keep this quick because we got a lot of ground to cover. So just want to acknowledge another successful summer. Some of the summer concert series in partnership with Youth and Family Services had another great 5 outdoor concerts, really well attended. Just a beloved community event. Another amazing Southborough Summer Nights. Really amazing fireworks show, I think, for people that were there. And again, couldn't be done without the assistance from the Friends of Recreation. Moving into summer, into the fall, we, of course, launched the RAP programs, or I should say the department launched the RAP programs. They offered 44 programs in this first round. 38 are actually being run. There's 345 participants, and it's just the first one, which I think, is a lot, it's very positive. And just giving Jen, a lot of credit for there, because she really oversees all of that with the assistance of Denise during registration. It includes contacting instructors for the programs, creating and promoting the program schedule, running the actual registration, working with the schools for space. I mean, it's 38 of these that they're successfully running, and I think any parent in town would tell you how smoothly and appreciated the programs are. Moving on, we're quickly approaching our 45th annual Heritage Day on October 8th. So far so good. The booth slots are filling up with over 80 vendors so far. We just want to make sure everybody remembers the parade that will kick off on Monday at 10 o'clock, including all of our local groups, scouts, sports, music, the bands, political parties, candidates, and selectmen. So looking forward to that. I haven't actually looked at the weather forecast, the long term. It's supposed to be nice. Knock on wood. Just want to thank BP Trucking. They donate the dumpsters every year. The Community Emergency Response Team, who volunteers to help with the first aid in traffic. The DPW help with some of the setup. And so again, just looking forward to another great weekend of events. Very quickly, Halloween party. That's a new addition to Recreation. So this year's the first year that Recreation's taking it over from the Youth and Family Services. So that will be on October 26th at the Finn School, running from 7 to 8:30 at Finn. Always well attended. So again, something that Friends of Recreation and high school students volunteer to help with as well. And almost there, the 12th annual Gobble Wobble also coming up on November 22nd. This is where we want to just give some credit and thanks to the Friends of Southborough Rec. So the president's Amy Townsley, along with Jolene Chepsky and Belinda Adams, the three really put together this entire road race. It's a significant fundraiser for the Friends of Southborough Rec, and a lot of work obviously goes into it. Those contributions help them make contributions to scholarships, to Southborough Summer Nights, to facility improvements, to the summer concert series, to the playgrounds, to the Special Olympic programs. And this year, they're also giving back to the Southborough Food Pantry. So it's a really great event, and we're very appreciative to the three of them. The road race itself has had up to 1,200 people registered in a given year. So it's a big event for Southborough. I do want to note that Amy is stepping down as the president, unfortunately, in January. So this is just something we want to share with the public. It is an opportunity if you're looking for a way to give back to town. The Friends of Southborough Rec could certainly use more volunteers, and they really are key to helping to make things like the Gobble Wobble and Summer Nights possible. So interested volunteers should reach out to Amy or Doreen. So those are kind of the highlights from the programs and the events. Something that, again, I think just probably doesn't always go fully appreciated, so thank you for letting us take a few minutes to thank those involved. Any questions on that? Okay. Quick note, Recreation Director replacement planning. Again, we spoke about it last time. Doreen did submit her letter of resignation effective June 30th of 2019. So we have started the discussions on what is the process to find her replacement. Luckily, this year we had actually already updated the job description for the director to bring it up to date. Of course, it's something we'll look at, and we reviewed it with the Personnel Board. Did not know it at the time, so I don't know. Maybe we should have seen the writing on the walls. But that said, we'll take a fresh look at it. And we're talking about the budget that needs to be submitted this month, and if we'd suggest any adjustments might need to be made to that. And then we obviously just look forward to working with all of you on finding a replacement, likely starting that process, next spring in anticipation of June.
If I can add one thing to that, Mr. Purple is always available and willing to help with searches and everything such as this, and he brings great value. So I would highly recommend utilizing him.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And last but not least, the capital planning. So as discussed, we are working on getting the recreation items into the capital plan. Those discussions are in progress with the town administrator and finance director, and have been for some time now. So we did initially put forward an updated capital plan. It's been shared with advisory, and so right now, we're more in discussions about the timing considerations and maybe different options for placement in anticipation of the deadline date of Wednesday, October 17th. So we're still, we have more questions, and we're in the midst of reviewing those. I think we're meeting tomorrow. So our goal is to get something, that I think we're all comfortable and finalized with, hopefully, ahead of that date, and obviously to bring back and review with the board. Just to briefly mention, for those, I think you're all well aware, but for those that might not be, our immediate priorities do remain getting turf fields in town that are owned by the town, and then the Clander Field repairs. In regards to a turf field, it does remain a key need in the path ahead to get our facilities into the maintenance cycle, which we spoke a lot about last year. We need options available when fields need to come off for repairs, which we experienced recently. And then for allowing activities to start earlier in the season and to support days like this. We're, in the month of September, I think, today, it was our 8th day of fields being closed. I anticipate tomorrow, it's very likely the fields will be closed because they need a whole day to dry out before we can put people back on it. And really, the spring was no different. It was a really, really wet spring as well. And so, when you think about moving forward, turf, as we think is a logical place we need to look. And then again, on Clander, it remains a top priority. It was, at one point, one of our best, higher quality fields in town. And I know there's a lot of people who just want to get it there again. Obviously, there was questions raised at town meeting on the feasibility. So really, for both of these projects, our initial focus would be on the design. We could address the questions and concerns raised at the last town meeting. And then I believe the Board of Selectmen is also helping to pursue resolution on some of those questions specific to Clander Field. Let me pause there. Any questions on those?
On the schedule, as far as the capital plan, Kristen, what are your goals to plug these in so we know within the next month what we're doing?
Our goals or recreations?
Well, we know what recreations are, but when can we expect to have a final report from the town administrator as to where these items fit into the capital plan?
So I think what we're trying to do, again, I think the Rec Commission is trying to catch up for a number of years where a lot of these things, were left undone. And we're trying to find a way to do that in what is a more, responsible way so that we can fit it into our plan. As you saw earlier tonight, the tax rate is jumping up because the infusion of the public safety facility, and paying for that. For the next 4 fiscal years, it's going to be very difficult. We know that the turf field is kind of the linchpin for a lot of these other projects to happen. But the field, the lights and everything, that's a $2 million expense. So we need to try and figure out how to work this in. We have a tentative plan at this point. Again, hopefully, there's some more discussion to be had. We'll have that tomorrow. I'm hoping sometime in the next, week, this time next week, middle of next week, we've got a better handle as to where we are. Again, this is where we're slotting these items. Karen Galligan's in the back of the room. She can tell you, every year we talk about the items that are slotted for that particular year, and what, whether there's a need to move something or not move something. So it's a fluid process.
Right, I think we need to know where they're slotted.
Yes.
Soon.
Yes.
And then why they may get bumped out. Because we listened earlier about the library.
Yes.
So there's still other things that are in flux here. But it'd be nice to have something where we started and why we need to move something. So everyone knows early on, the community knows why it was suggested. And yes, the tax rate is going up considerably.
Right. And I think there are things that, that get, the things that you moved out of last year that should have been, that got bumped a year. The
And catch up.
culvert replacement on Northborough Road, we bumped that for 3 years because that plate's been holding. It's time to fix that. Some of the issues with the library, they had a lot of capital items that were postponed last year. A lot of those need to come forward, unfortunately, or fortunately. Some of those will be covered by insurance, but we're going to pay for those in increased premiums over the next 3 years. So you will.
There's roughly 15 people, or maybe 20 people, that understand right from the very beginning, whether it be advisory or this board or the finance team, where we started and how we got to the conclusion we get to for town meeting.
Right.
That needs to be more of a public discussion before December or January. Town meetings earlier this year as to what the end result is and why.
I'm happy to have
No,
those
I know you
discussions and get the information. I mean, look, you see when we do the budget presentations and that, we have 6 people in the room, and that's including 5 selectmen.
Right.
So it's,
But it's televised.
No, it is televised, and we do put the documents online, and we do try to publicize them and everything.
No, I'm not being critical, but I think
no,
it's
no,
helpful
I agree.
to everyone
I
to
agree.
know why things get moved around.
I agree. So, and a lot of that is going to, the capital is obviously determined as to what the operating looks like as well. So we try to make that balance, and make sure that we can fund the things we need to. And if there are things that we are able to push off for a year or to switch out with other projects that have higher priorities, then we will do that. So, and like I said, it's been good working with rec, especially the past couple of meetings, and just trying to figure out where the best place is to put these so that they come forward as part of a whole plan.
Correct.
Rather than sitting out there as one project.
I appreciate the effort. I think it's great.
Thank you. Again, just keeping it on the radar, and at some point, when things get settled, we will resume, more public forums where we remind people who may not have been paying attention last year or are new to the community, some of the background of this. But for now, again, the immediate, following those 2 priorities, some of the medium to longer term remain obviously Woodward and Choke Fields. We need to see kind of what happens with the public safety facility there. Lundblad, Karen told you where we are with that in terms of feasibility. And then lastly, Finn and Mooney would be behind those. So with that, really, we mentioned the next steps. We're doing the ongoing discussions. So once those are complete, I think I'll follow up with both you and advisory to see where we land. And then beyond that, on a quarterly basis, at a minimum, coming back and giving very similar update. That way this list might not be quite as long, but I appreciate you listening to all of it this evening. And that's all we have.
Well, thank you for coming. I think it was important, and I think for the public to know the status of the updates, based on some questions that have been asked in the past. I think this was really positive. I think it's a great step. I think you've got a full, great commission now, which, you know I personally expect really great things from you guys. I mean, you've got every tool that you need to do it. You know, you're in the capital plan now, which we asked for. So I think you're definitely moving in the right direction. And we look forward to your next quarterly update, unless you need something before then.
That's great. We appreciate your support.
Thank you. All right, next up, Chairman's Report. I just wanted to touch base with the board on a few things. We had a very successful employee appreciation luncheon on the 21st. We had approximately 35 to 40 employees come. We were able to shut the townhouse down a little bit early. They came, they had a great little barbecue of hamburgers and hot dogs, great conversation. I think everybody knew how appreciated they were. You know, we made the effort to reach out to every table, so all the employees knew how much the board and the town administrator appreciates all the hard work that they do on a daily basis for us. They may not always hear that, so it was a wonderful opportunity to do that, and there was a wonderful turnout. Also, Karen, before you leave, there was a gentleman, and I know I don't want to screw up his name, that just retired. It was his last day on the 21st. Norman. I knew I was going to screw it up. So how long was he with the town, Karen? 31 years. 31 years. Norman, and what's his last name? Bazell. So best wishes for a wonderful retirement for him, and to thank him, which we did. I stood on a chair, and, you know, being short, I have to do these things, and was able to thank him on behalf of the town for his wonderful service. So thank you, Karen, too. Also on the 21st, I had the opportunity to do a ride-along with Officer Richardson. And very enlightening, very interesting. I have a very different perspective now of some things. I was the crazy person in the car, shocked that the people that don't get out of the way when there's sirens and flashers behind you. It was absolutely amazing to try to get from the south side of town to Central Street, where a car was being towed. Took almost 10 minutes because trucks just didn't get out of the way. It was like, it was just amazing to me. It was very eye-opening. I will say they did not let me push the siren button. I did ask. So it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to see things from a different perspective. Instead of being that person that when they pull up behind you in the car that you kind of get all nervous. We were the bad boys, as the song goes. So that was very appreciated. I thank Chief Paulus and Officer Richardson for giving me the opportunity to do that. Also on the 19th, Mr. Purple and I did a site walk, which was at the new public safety, which was very enlightening. It's really hard to picture when you see a design, but it's one thing to actually walk and see the footprint in place and see all the work that's going on. It was very appreciated, hard hat and all. Was very appreciated. And to see that the golf was still continuing. There were golfers there. It was kind of not the nicest of days when we went. It was after all the rain. Also, the one last thing I wanted to bring up was anybody that's watching, we are looking for three vacancies, on permitting boards. So 2 on conservation and 1 for a ZBA alternate. Townwide, there's 37 vacancies for boards, committees, and commissions. So, but I think conservation has a huge need at this point. They're down 2 people. It's a 7-member board. They're having a tough time meeting with quorum. So if there's anybody that has an interest in serving the town, conservation and ZBA could certainly use somebody stepping forward. So that is all I have, other than the beam. Like Jason said, I would hope a lot of citizens would come forward and sign the beam and be part of history taking place that will be there long after most of us are gone, I'm sure. So thank you. Mr. Purple.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So 3 items tonight, none of them are good. Just kind of like to get that out of the way first.
I should have gone second.
You should have. So as you may be aware, and I know emails have gone out about this, Christine Johnson, school superintendent, has announced she'll be retiring at the end of this fiscal year on June 30th. I've only had the ability to work with Christine for a few years. Obviously, she continued the spirit of collaboration and cooperation that Charles Gabron, her predecessor, established with the town. I think it's made, it's been great for the town's budget process. It's been great, I think, overall, the relationship, the things that we've been able to achieve, and trying to respect and further the needs of each party, both the town and the school, so that it's one need, it's one path forward. And I can only hope that when they do find her replacement, that they will be able to find somebody who's going to continue in that same spirit of cooperation that we've enjoyed for the past 6 years. So, again, we've got a whole budget process to go through. We're not there yet, but that is something that is going to be coming up and probably heat up after town meeting is over. Secondly, I also wanted to announce that Mark Robideau, the building inspector, has submitted his resignation. Mark is going to be leaving us effective November 9th for a building inspector's position with the town of Lincoln. Mark has been, and I've said this before, one of the best building inspectors that I've had the pleasure of working with. He is extremely knowledgeable, he's very professional, and he's able to converse as easily with a resident as with a contractor. He's always been very helpful and very professional, and I've really appreciated that. He's going to be missed. The position has been advertised, and we are looking actively for candidates and also putting together probably a bridge between, Mark and whoever the next person is, because obviously we have things going on, public safety project aside. There are things that we need to make sure that we have those things covered. The final item I wanted to make the board aware of, we did have a bid that was out for some renovations and improvements to Southborough Golf Club. As a result of the public safety facility, some renovations that would need to happen to the 9th green and the first tee box, and some other related items. There was one bid that was received. I believe there was 7 or 8 sets of plans that were pulled. Only one bid came in. The base bid was almost $608,000. There was another $120,000 in bid alternates. The CPA funding that was part of the article that was approved for the work, if you include the contingency, was about $340,000. So you can see there's a little bit of a discrepancy, 607, 340. I think the board would concur that the bids need to be rejected due to inadequate funding. We've already begun the conversation with the golf architect as to what we can do and how we can restructure the bid so that it better reflects the amount of money that we had. They seem to think that trying to compress the work into the time frame before this construction season ended was part of the issue. And if we extend that out into next April, it may be something that gets done. But obviously, there's still going to be some temporary locations used for 9 and 1 that golf has been doing now, to open the season next year. So it's not something that's going to happen as quickly as we had hoped, but we're working with the golf architect to get this rebid in such a fashion so that it comes in within our bid pricing. So that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Consent agenda. Are there any of the 4 items that anyone would like to hold? That being said, do we have a motion to accept approval of meeting minutes June 22nd, 2017, and September 17th, 2018? Signed warrant for November 6, 2018 state election. Number 3, award contract for fire chief screening consultant. And 4, accept resignation of Sean Cronin from Recreation Commission.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, other matters properly before the board, Fayville Hall disposition. Mr. Purple?
Want me to lead off?
I will let you lead off.
So, thank you. So as the board may recall, it's been, I want to say a couple of months, I think, since we visited this issue. The board had put out, the town had put out an RFP for the disposition of the property for Fayville Hall and the property next door at 40 Central. And despite the fact that there was 7 or 8 sets of bid packet that was taken out, there was only one bid response. And the board deemed the bid response to be inadequate, and the bid was rejected. There was some comments at the time that the bid could have been more widely distributed. There are certain requirements that we have to do through the procurement laws. However, I think that the comment, had some validity to it. Since we had these public discussions about the bid and the bid being rejected, there is probably, 3 to 4 people who have submitted their information to the Selectmen's office to be made aware when the bid does go back out, because now they're aware of the issue, and they are interested in doing that. I spoke with the chair, and she wanted this to be put back on the agenda just for discussion, and to see if the board had any thoughts before this is put back out. Assuming that you want to put this back out, I believe that was the last conversation that I remember, or the last piece of the conversation I remember having last time we talked about it. Obviously, I think we need to enlist, the EDC and potentially other parties to try and help us, get the word out about the bid, and to make sure that there is a larger awareness, for the property. The building is now technically not occupied, let's put it that way. So, but we are maintaining the heat. We're not winterizing the property, and Facilities is doing a daily check on the building just to make sure that we're satisfying the requirements, so that the building still remains under the town's insurance. I think the two issues beyond simply the advertising pieces of it that we are the nice twos based on the work that the ad hoc committee did, is obviously the ability for the parking, and also the maintaining of the exterior of the building, the historical facade. So those are, I think that frames the issue, and I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Purple. One of the things I had asked for was, I know that there was a lot of concern, as Mark mentioned, about how it was marketed and so on. So I did ask Mr. Purple, what were the restrictions, being a municipality, of potentially bringing in a professional to help with the marketing side of it, if it's even allowed, if we can do that. And I know if you'd like to touch base on kind of the general response you got to that.
Sure. So we spoke with the Inspector General's office just to get an understanding of if we were using any kind of real estate services to help market the property. And obviously, it would not be something that's exempt from the state's procurement requirements. And the question that we had is, how do you determine what the threshold is, what the estimated dollar amount would be, which will determine, do we have to bid it? Can we just get 3 quotes? Is it something that we can just do under best business practice and not get 3 quotes? And the rule that they use is 5% of the assessed value of the property is what you should use as your guideline as to whether it needs to be put out to bid or whether you can just simply do it by quotes. And since the last appraisal we had for the property came in, combined 40 and 42 was about $500,000, and the assessed value for the 2 parcels is $519,000. 5% is gonna put that, you know, probably in the vicinity of where we're going to have to do a bid if we were to look to bring in, you know, some real estate, some real estate assistance with the marketing piece of this, which, if you recall, is 5 times what we were offered for the property the last time around.
Thank you. So my point in asking was just so we would have information as we look to go forward on what we want to do. That was an option, obviously. For me, it's not really an option anymore, once I heard that. But again, for me, it was getting a question answered. I would be interested in hearing some of the board's thoughts on it. I mean, I thought about trying to find a way to utilize some of the real estate expertise that we have on this board, for one, to potentially come up with some other ways that we could market this project, this RFP, so that we could get the maximum benefit back to the town. So again, that's kind of the reasoning why I had asked Mr. Purple, just to have some general information. I'd hoped it would have came back a very different answer. And, you know, it would have answered the questions that some of those had with the last process as to maybe if we had done something different and trying to find a way to best serve the taxpayer. So obviously, this is a great discussion for the board to have on how we want to go forward.
Can the historical commission sell this property on behalf of the town? Are they under the same guidelines as far as seeking out an appraisal or broker?
The selectmen are the only ones who can dispose of the property as the owner.
But can they go to the state? Because it's a historical building. Do they have other opportunities that we wouldn't have? Under adaptive reuse?
Yes.
Or the valuation of the building, would that be different after they seek out input from the Historical Society?
I think one of my conversations with Mr. Hubley back when the adaptive reuse bylaw was passed is that it does open up the opportunities and ability for people to use the building in different ways more easily. Yes.
All right.
I'm sorry, I wasn't
right.
getting what you were asking.
No, the value would be more than what
Correct.
we're looking at.
Correct.
The percentage
It would be more valuable because there's more you can do with it under that bylaw.
Right.
Yes. Sorry.
We still would be in the same dilemma as far as putting out an RFP to get someone to broker that building for us, because the valuation would be more.
Correct.
Okay. Are we looking at 2 parcels this time around?
I think you're looking at putting it back out the same way. I know there was a discussion as to whether, we separate out part of 40, and the town retains that piece, or whether we, and combine the remainder with 42. I don't know that there's a value in doing that. I think it all depends on what the use is, what the proposals are that come back.
So in saying that, I think it needs to be very clear that the parking is a priority for the town.
Yes. Those are the 2 priorities that the committee carried forward was.
And roughly how many spaces were we looking for? 30?
Well, if you ask recreation, they'll take as many as you can get.
No, but there was a number.
There was a number, I don't remember off the top of my head, but we did calculate a number based
Kristen, can you come to the mic? Sorry.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure that everyone can hear.
No problem. It's actually in the recommendation from the committee, but we did calculate a number based on, perceived maximum usage, if sports were in play and people were at the park.
That needs to be identified this time around, that the town has a position that we need X number of spaces to accommodate recreation. The use for the field use across the street.
Okay.
How many spots, do we know how many spots are in the lot there now?
it's random, it's on the
It's,
grass.
yeah, I was gonna say, it's not striped, it's
Right.
really.
Hence
it's
how big
very
Overlapping the
random.
property
It's a-
behind it.
I
It's
can
an,
park
it's
on
a,
the lawn.
it's an odd-shaped
Yeah,
parcel. It comes to a point, so.
okay.
I can refine that analysis
You
and
see
send it
that
over.
Mark gets it, so that he has the number
Yeah.
to incorporate.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I think it's, if you have somebody that comes in that wants to make it a residential use, then, you know, there's gonna be, you know, more dedicated parking that they're looking for. If somebody's coming in looking for a business use or commercial use, there's going to be the availability for parking during off hours and weekends and things like that, when it would benefit, you know, recreation the most, and the facilities across the street that all this money was just spent on to upgrade. So,
Identify it.
exactly, that needs to be, so we'll identify that.
Anything else?
I don't agree that there was a problem with marketing or notice. I think given the desire to save the building and keep parking, I think the response we got was appropriate and generous. So I don't think that's the problem.
Fair enough.
Again, and I'm in favor of putting this RFP back out
Yep.
again. And, you know, the most that we can do to, you know, while we can't hire anybody to market
Yep.
it for us, there's nothing stopping us, I wouldn't think, from inviting local realtors to an open house that the town puts on itself.
Great idea.
If there are, you know, we know who we did get the bid from. Certainly reaching out to that party again, plus
Yeah.
plus other similar companies to what he has, that would probably generate the interest. I think just the most that we can do to get the word out.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, again, no guarantee it's gonna
Nope.
have a different result, but
Right.
hopefully a better result for the
Oh.
town.
Brian, the only reason I just wanted to comment, the only reason that I said that there may be some validity in the fact that we didn't, you know, that may have been marketed better, is because there were people who came in after the fact, after we had public discussions, and said, you know, so is that bid still open? Make sure that, you know, you take my name, my information down, if you put it back out, I'd like to, you know, to explore it a little bit. So, you know, when that happens, it's like, okay, you know, maybe if they'd known somehow, you know, then maybe we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. We would have already taken some action, so.
About a year ago or so as well, I attended one of the breakfast meetings that EDC has, and the Fayville Hall itself was one of the, you know, featured segments of that breakfast, where they indicated that would be a parcel that would be coming up for sale, and there were a number of people in attendance that, you know, I thought that would have played well to, may have been an interest in making an offer. So I think reaching out to EDC, if we can get a listing of the attendees from that
Yeah.
session as well, and just include them on the RFP distribution, just so they're aware of it.
That's great. All right, Mr. Purple.
I have another question.
Sorry, Mrs.
How do you
Farren.
limit the conditions of sale? So we don't find ourselves in a situation where we have a laundry list of conditions of purchase.
I'm not sure. I'm
Well,
not sure how you
I don't want to
can,
delay the process.
right.
But sometimes conditions get in the way of,
When you say conditions that a responder would
yes.
be put in?
Yeah. So the bid is predicated upon these things happening in order for the bid to be valid.
Right.
No, I
So,
understand your point.
I don't know
You know, I
how
think
you
it's
would
a-
do it.
Yeah, I think it's a catch-22, though. The more restrictions that you saying, you know, there cannot be any.
No, I don't want
you
to
know,
link to
conditions.
another proposal, which has conditions on it too, also.
I missed that.
Reject with every bid you want.
On anyone, if we're selling a piece of property and it has a condition on it that reflects a condition on another piece of property that a property owner owns, and holds up this proceeding forward and one of the conditions
Yep.
fails, then the whole thing fails.
But to your point, if the parking was not an issue, and if the exterior was not an issue, then I would be recommending that this board hire an auctioneer firm, which, you know, I've done successfully in previous positions, and allow them to auction, you know, the property. They market it, they do the whole 9 yards, they get the bidders out there and everything, but again, you then lose all control over the two things that is important as mitigating factors in this discussion.
And I know where you're going with the.
Well, no, I don't want to hold up a process, but I also want to be fair to the individual that has interest, whoever it may be,
Right.
in a piece of property, and then finds that we feel there are too many conditions.
Right.
I just don't know how you,
So you balance you're trying to give the
fine.
bidders some kind of creativity to come up with a proposal that
all right,
meets the things that we're interested in, but,
okay.
you know, it's also got to be, you know, if we put something in that the town, you know, would like to execute a P&S, in fact, it is in there,
Mhm.
you know, within X number of days after the proposal is received. Obviously, if you put conditions in there that don't allow that to be satisfied,
Right.
which the previous proposal we had didn't, then therefore, it's really not responsive to the requests. So,
Just trying to find balance.
no, I understand. I appreciate that.
All right, Mr. Purple, I think you have direction.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything further? No?
No.
All right, public comment. Mr. Stivers, name and address,
Me
please.
again, thank you. Sam Stivers, 7 Presidential Drive. Wanted to be sure that topic I've been talking about with the EDC is on the Selectmen's radar. As part of the conversations that are going on around the downtown revitalization, development, et cetera, one of the constraints that comes up frequently is the lack of town-owned property for things like parking and other things that other towns have done to help support the business community in the downtown area. I pointed out to them that there's a parcel of property, 54-40 on the assessor's map book, that is behind the current House of Pizza there, abuts the railroad tracks. It's sort of a L-shaped piece of property owned by Mass Electric. It's 1.67 acres. It allegedly, somebody told me, might have some hazardous waste issues related to it. However, my legal people tell me that, in fact, towns actually do deals with people like Mass Electric for that kind of property, which is sort of landlocked in terms of how they might want to use it. And if you actually were going to build, you know, a sandbox for kids or something on it, maybe that's a problem with hazardous waste there. But if you're going to pave it, cap it, it is possible to do a deal where you can deal with the liability issues, and it's not a huge risk for the town to accept liability for whatever's underneath the ground there. Seems to me that there's a great opportunity to actually use that for 1.67 acres. You could park 100 cars on it. You could have a lot of space there to rubberize it and put playground there, picnic tables or whatever. Bring food trucks in or whatever you want to do there. It's got a driveway access, and I'm not sure the exact layout, but it looks like it may be the same driveway that goes down behind the House of Pizza and the nail salon and whatever in there, and they may have an easement there. I don't know exactly the layout of the property, but I would think that's something that would be a huge plus if the town could figure out how to do that. EDC has started looking into it. They've said that they've not found any so far legal entanglements, or it's not you know, on the brownfield list or whatever. But it is not inconceivable that Mass Electric could be persuaded to do something philanthropic with the property if they don't have a use for it. And I got to believe somebody in town knows somebody very senior at Mass Electric, as opposed to going and knocking on the door of the property management department and saying, are you interested in giving us a good deal on this thing? So it seems to me that could open up a lot of possibilities for what we might think about doing to enhance the downtown opportunity for businesses, residents, et cetera, to have a place where people could, you know, push the strollers in the morning and have a picnic table to have coffee, sit down, kids play, et cetera, an attraction downtown that could do a lot to maybe bring some additional business in potentially. So I think EDC is looking into it, but I would think that this is something that the Selectmen would be in a position to drive faster, farther, given that there's probably some financial implications for this, but who knows what Mass Electric might want to do about it, but it doesn't hurt to ask, I would think. So I would urge you to consider that and see what it might bring in terms of opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam. I know we had spoken briefly about that, and I know EDC is checking into it. I'll follow up with them and
Okay.
see where they're at.
And they reported at their last meeting that they'd looked into it at least at a high level and had not found a problem with the property, but again, I'm not sure of all the things you need to do from a legal standpoint to check it out. On the other hand, it's been done in other towns, and if we're looking for an attorney who's done that, I could probably dig up a name or two to offer for that, so.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing it to our attention as well. Name and address, please.
Louise Barron, Sadie Hut Lane. I don't understand why Fayville hasn't gone to an agent and been put on MLS. Is there a reason that hasn't happened? Hello?
It just came back for discussion this evening, so that's something we can look at moving forward.
I would think so, with the assessed value, what was it you said?
500,000 for the two parcels.
And we were gonna give it away for 5,000.
But we didn't, thank you.
Yeah, well, hello. So I really do think that we would need to have an agent handle this and advertise it. You would any other MLS property, and take it from there. I mean, this bid process seems a little, underhanded to me as far as I mean, everyone should know that this property is for sale, and so is handling it. And that's the way you do it. It's above board. You don't have anybody bring bids in and whenever. And everybody knows that this property is for sale. And if anyone's interested, that's fine. If it's not, then go to step number 2.
Well, and I think, Ms. Barron, that's why we had talked tonight about, we had done, I know this conversation's been had in the past, that the town met the requirements of what we were required to do in order to RFP this parcel. But I think the discussion tonight was to find a better way to certainly market it and, potentially make it available to more people. So, I certainly take your comments to heart, and thank you for bringing them forward, but I think you're in sync with the decision and what we talked about tonight, so you're on the same page.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, thank you. And that will do it. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.